sunbathe till I waste away. I whisper to the campfire, oh campfire, please teach me how to turn such simple things into light and beauty. Well, Moses saw God in a burning bush, one praying, please burn away my sins, hear my plight and soothe my feet.
Just 1 second. It's taking a while to load in for some reason. Come on. I know you want to. I know you really, really want to. There we go. Hello, chat. How are we all doing today? I don't want to make it a habit of just reading fan fiction like every stream. Like, I want to have a bit of variety, but things are just getting so good, and I don't want to I want to know what happens next. And that is my dog. Sorry about that. It's so weird, cause like I normally do these late at night, and I guess in some time zones it is kind of late-ish, but the sun hasn't even fully set yet for me. Like, this might be the earliest I've ever done a reading stream. But yeah, we're gonna be reading some more Tommyinnit's Clinic for Supervillains today. We left on a really interesting note. So, summary. This is an alternate universe where the people of L'Manberg are... Well, not everybody has powers, but there's like superheroes, supervillains, and vigilantes. And then there are some people that don't have, that have powers but don't use them, but aren't like heroes, villains, or vigilantes. And that's kind of what Tommy is. Sure, he helps heal, like, use his healing powers for mainly, like, the supervillains, but that doesn't make him a villain, per se. At least I don't think. Like, he doesn't actively go out and fight crime. Or actively go out and cause crime, I suppose. But anyway, his roommates, he found out to be vigilantes. His roommates, Tubbo and Rambu, are the vigilantes Nuke and Ender. He doesn't know that his new found family, quote unquote, of Wilbur Soot, Filza, and Technoblade are supervillains Siren, Zephyrus, and Blade. He's just been healing them without knowing their real identities. Without really knowing any supervillain's real identity. For safety purposes. But the thing is, what recently happened was Dream, superhero Dream, caught on to the fact that villains were being healed somehow when they should have been dying. Which, by the way, is not a thing that heroes are supposed to do. They are meant to incapacitate, not to kill. That is their code. But Dream has been hurting villains with the intent to kill. And he found out that Tommy was healing villains. And so with the help of 404, well, I guess maybe, who knows. So he and hero 404, George, I would assume, kidnapped Tommy, and now the Soots are trying to figure out where they took him. So maybe this next chapter we'll get to figure out where he is. From his perspective, you know? So let's do that. Window capture. Oh, and if you're new to the stream, be sure to drop a follow, because at 150 followers, I'm going to be reading Percy Jackson on stream. That's one I'm really looking forward to if I ever hit that goal. Alright. Oh, and not only the Soots are trying to find him, but they also confided in Tubbo and Rambu to help find him. So, like, they all know each other's identities now. Well, Tubbo and Rambu found out on their own, and the Soots found out the Vigilantes' identities on their own as well. Well, it was more of Wilbur figured it out. Alright. The story is by Bones and the Bees, and I'm fairly certain that's also their Twitter handle, so go check them out. They are a really, really good writer. Alright. Chapter 17. Dreaming of a Better Place. Oh. Summary. Things seem off and Tommy can't figure out why. Huh. Is 404's power, like, at the end of the chapter where Tommy got kidnapped, he, like, pressed his hands over Tommy and said sleep, and I figured that was just to, like, knock him out, to bring him to wherever. Did he put him in, like, a dream sequence to try and get more information out of him? God damn, that is... Damn. Alright. Let's see. Trigger warnings for this chapter, they're different than usual. Usual descriptions of wounds, minor dissociation, somewhat derealization, heavy themes of unreality, and struggling to distinguish what's real. Okay, so I'm guessing 404 put Tommy in a dream sequence. I still don't know how you managed to get stabbed in the foot. It was that bitch 404. Fucker's got stupidly good aim. Tommy snorted as he pressed the gauze against Siren's foot, blood soaking the cotton and making him quickly switch it out for a new handful. It was just the two of them in the back room of the cafe tonight. Siren had showed up with a knife sticking out of his boot, and now Tommy was kneeling against the tile floor, trying not to wrinkle his nose as he tried to figure out the best angle to heal Siren's foot from. "Get better at dodging then, lame ass," Tommy teased, moving the gauze away and placing his hands on his foot. He closed his eyes, feeling warmth pool from his hands as his energy seeped into the wound. In front of him, he could hear Siren sigh in relief, and by the time Tommy opened his eyes, he saw Siren was slumped against the floor. "Thank you, Tommy," Siren breathed, looking much more relaxed than he had a few moments before. "That hurt like a bitch." "No shit," Tommy huffed, moving his hands away and standing up to wash them off in the sink. When he turned the sink on, there was a split second where the water pouring out of the faucet looked as though it were blood red. But then Tommy blinked, and it was normal water. It must have been a trick of the light. Shaking his head, Tommy washed off his hands, watching Siren's blood trail down the drain in lazy swirls. Then he used a towel to dry them, and moved back to sit next to Siren, who was now leaning against the wall. "You're such a good kid, Toms," Siren said, smiling at him and reaching out a hand to rest on his shoulder. The gesture felt so familiar. It was something Wilbur would do sometimes when they were chatting. Just a gentle squeeze of his shoulder, with Wilbur's calloused fingertips dragging roughly against his sweater fabric. Glancing at Siren's hands, he noticed how they were similar callus marks on Siren's fingertips. He gulped. Tommy shoved away his first thought in favor of wondering if Siren played guitar too. Stop lying to yourself," a voice in his head suddenly echoed. Stiffening, Tommy whipped his head around, trying to figure out where the voice had come from. He glanced around the cafe back room for who could have said that, but only saw Siren giving him a concerned look. "Are you all right?" Siren asked, cocking his head slightly. He opened his mouth to reply that yes, he was totally fine. But instead, he found himself hesitating. There was something off about Siren. Although the twist of his smile was painfully familiar, along with the messy curls that fell over his forehead and the casual way he was still holding on to Tommy's shoulder, something wasn't right. It was in his voice. His voice changer was still on, but it sounded different than normal. Was it running out of battery? "Tommy?" "Sorry, I'm fine," Tommy said, shaking his head and placing his hands on the tiled floor to try and ground himself. Just zoned out for a second. But he wasn't fine. As he pressed his palms against the floor, he expected to feel the icy tiles jabbing into his skin. Instead, the floor was warm. The floor of the cafe back room was never warm. "You know who Siren is. Stop pretending you don't." That same voice echoed in his head again. Tommy frowned. "No, I don't. Shut the fuck up," he whispered back. "Tommy, who are you talking to?" Siren asked, looking more concerned with every passing second. "Just ask him, point blank. I'm sure he'll tell you." "Shut up!" Tommy hissed again, twisting his fingers into his hair. The hand on his shoulder moved, and Siren crouched down in front of him. "Tommy, can you hear me? What's going on?" Shutting his eyes to avoid looking at Siren's face, Tommy shook his head. "Siren, I think I need a minute alone." "You're such an idiot, letting him get away with these lies." "I don't want to leave you, not when you seem this upset." And fuck. Of course Siren had to sound so goddamn caring when he said that. Just like... No, he wasn't going to think of that. He wasn't going to let himself think of who Siren reminded him of. Coward. Shut up! Tommy shouted, clenching his jaw as he pulled at his hair, wincing at the sharp pain that flashed across his skull. Siren, please, for the love of God, give me a minute alone. Siren sucked in a sharp breath, and Tommy expected more arguing. But after a few moments, he heard footsteps leading away, and listened as the door to the alley clicked shut. Breathing a sigh of relief, Tommy slumped against the wall, letting his hands fall out of his hair. He placed them on the tile again, and found that it was still warm. It shouldn't be warm. It's obvious when you take a minute to think about it. Tommy wasn't sure if the voice was referring to the floor being warm or who Siren reminded him of, but he didn't really care either way. What he did care about, however, was the fact that the voice was much, much louder now. Just open your eyes. Stop being such a pussy. I'm not being a pussy. Yes, you fucking are. When the voice was no longer an echo in his head, Tommy's eyes flew open, and he shrieked when he saw a familiar face filling up his vision. It was... Oh, I thought it was Dream. Oh, that's weird. It was him. Tommy. It was his own face staring back at him. He was reminded of the time Jester had copied his face as a joke, but it was 10 times more unsettling because, unlike with Jester, this thing was speaking with his own voice, too. What the shit? Tommy yelped, pressing himself against the wall. Who the fuck are you? The other Tommy huffed in laughter. Please, tell me you're not stupid enough to not recognize your own face? I mean, I know you're pretty face blind, but you should recognize yourself when you're talking to him. Tommy scowled. Am I dreaming? Better fucking hope you're dreaming, or else you're gonna have to start looking for a therapist. The other Tommy teased, although there was nothing light in his voice. This was weird, talking to himself like this. Even though it had to be a dream, it still made something cold settle in his gut, and he wanted to wake up as soon as possible. Why are you here? Tommy asked, narrowing his eyes at the other him. I dunno. You tell me. The other Tommy shrugged. Seems to me like you got some internal issues you need to work out, mostly involving your favorite supervillain. There's nothing to work out, Tommy spat. I'm not trying to find out Siren's identity. But you already know it. You're just lying to yourself. The other him taunted. I don't know his identity, Tommy shot back. There are plenty of other guys in the city with brown hair who play guitar. That's not just it though, is it? The other him said, leaning in close. There's more you're picking up on. Gritting his teeth, Tommy tried to ignore the images flashing through his mind. The familiar laugh, the way he spoke, the way in which he'd sling his arm over Tommy's shoulders, as if he'd done it a million times before. Fuck off! Tommy shouted, lunging forward to push his other self back. It's just a coincidence! That's what he was going to keep telling himself. Even if a part of him wondered if he was just setting himself up for the same kind of pain that he went through when he found out Tubbo and Rambu being Nuke and Ender. I want to wake up, Tommy growled at his other self. Wake me the fuck up. The other him smiled, and it sent a shiver down his spine. Fine, your choice. And just like that, the world around Tommy began to fade. Colors bled out the back of the cafe, and Tommy squeezed his eyes shut as he slowly lost awareness of everything. A few beats passed. Then Tommy jolted awake. Bolting upright, Tommy glanced around wildly, taking in the familiar sight of his room at the Soot House. Shit, that was a weird fucking dream. Breathing a sigh of relief, Tommy wrapped his arms around himself and struggled to steady his racing heart. That dream was strange, but it wasn't anything to think too hard about. He shook his head to try and forget it, even though the events kept replaying in his mind. His own voice, taunting him, telling him he knew the truth, even if he was pretending he didn't. No, he didn't know anything. Fuck that voice in his head. After a few minutes of calming down, Tommy forced himself to climb out of bed. He should probably go downstairs and see what time it was. As Tommy headed down the stairs, he trailed his hand along the wall, listening as a babble of voices echoed up the floors. Seemed like Wilbur, Techno, and Phil were already awake. He focused on the bumpy texture of the wall brushing against his fingertips, and the cool wood against his bare feet. It was fine. He was fine. It was all just a dream. When he got downstairs, he heard a lot more voices than just Wilbur, Phil, and Techno's. Frowning, Tommy crept around the corner, peering into the living room, before gasping at the sight that greeted him. The entire fucking syndicate was sitting in the living room. Nemesis and Thanatos were crammed together on one corner of the couch, each of them holding a plate of pancakes on their laps and chatting animatedly to one another. Jester was settled on the opposite side, holding a glass of orange juice in one hand and waving his other hand around while talking to Daedalus. Rosethorn was sitting in the middle of the couch, with Blade settled on the floor in front of her, and she was carefully braiding the flowing pink hair that was usually kept hidden under his skull. As soon as he peeked his head around the corner, someone was throwing their arm around his shoulders. "Tommy!" Siren cheered, pulling him into the living room so everyone could see him. "You're finally awake!" "We were worried about you, mate," Zephyrus said, Tommy noticing he was standing at the kitchen stove, flipping pancakes in his fully veiled outfit like nothing about that was strange. Tommy blinked, his mind stumbling over what he was seeing. Why the hell are you guys here?" he managed to spit out, shrugging Siren's arm off of him. "We just thought we'd stop by and visit," Rosethorn told him, giving him a sweet smile. "We wanted to check in on you," Daedalus added, nodding at him. "But what about the people who actually fucking live here? Phil, Techno, Wilbur?" Tommy kept whipping his head around, but he didn't see any of them. Only the masked syndicate members. "Oh, don't worry about them. They know we're here," Zephyrus explained with a grin in his voice. For some reason, the words made a shiver run down Tommy's spine. Something was still wrong about this. "What the fuck are you all doing here? Seriously?" Tommy hissed, backing away from the syndicate members. "We just wanted to make sure you were okay," Nemesis said, seeming hurt by his suspicion. This doesn't... No, that doesn't make sense," Tommy muttered, shaking his head as he pressed his back against the wall. He pressed his hand to the glass, knowing that at this time of the morning, the glass was still cold to the touch since the window didn't see the sun until the afternoon. The glass was warm. Tommy frowned. Am I still dreaming?" he whispered to himself. There was a harsh laugh that grated on his ears, and Tommy scowled as a flash of blonde sprinted down the stairs and bounced into the living room. Took you longer than I thought that it would to figure that out," the other Tommy said, smirking at him. At his appearance, all the syndicate members seemed to freeze in place, as if they had been paused in a movie. "Fine, I failed your stupid fucking test. Can I please wake up for real this time?" Tommy snapped. "Maybe. Maybe not. It's up to you to figure out if you're dreaming or not," the other Tommy shrugged. "I mean, if you're still dreaming, it's probably because you got a lot on your mind. Like how comfortable Zephyrus seems to be in Phil's kitchen." "Shut the fuck up and just wake me up," Tommy said, squeezing his eyes shut again. The other Tommy snorted at that. Then he clapped his hands and the world faded away once more. It was dark. He was laying on something soft. Tommy blinked open his eyes and found himself staring at his ceiling once again. Was this real? Sitting up in his bed, Tommy looked around the room and saw nothing out of the ordinary. His backpack was on the floor, his sheets were rumpled, and he was wearing one of Wilbur's old sweatshirts. Tommy ran his hands up and down his arms, feeling the fabric tug against his skin. Did everything feel floaty, or was that just his imagination? Twisting in his bed, he pressed his hand against the glass window, and he couldn't tell if it was warm or cold. It was somewhere in between. Reaching his hands up, he twisted his fingers around his hair, tugging hard and yelping when pain flashed through him. That it felt pretty damn real. But then again, the pain had felt real before when he was in the back room of the cafe with Siren. Pulling his knees up to his chest, he whimpered quietly as he dug his nails into his palms. Was this real? He couldn't tell. It didn't feel like a dream, but how the hell was he supposed to trust what was a dream and what wasn't? His heart rate quickened. What if this wasn't real? What if he was just trapped in a never-ending spiral of dreams? Stumbling to his feet, Tommy rushed out the door of his bedroom. If he got downstairs and the syndicate was sitting on his fucking couch again, he'd know this was a dream. There. He just had to look for stuff that was out of the ordinary. Dreams were always weird like that. The smell of food wafted up to greet Tommy as he rushed down the steps. The wood floor was cool against his feet, and he ran into the living room, half expecting to find the entire syndicate waiting for him just like before. But the living room was empty. In the kitchen, Tommy saw Techno's pink braid swinging behind him as he moved between the stove and the counter, and he realized that Techno seemed to be in the midst of making hash browns. Techno? Tommy tried, carefully creeping towards the kitchen as he searched for any sign of the other Tommy. Techno glanced up at him through a few strands of hair that had fallen in his face. "Hello," he greeted, grabbing a spatula and using it to stir the potatoes in the pan. "I was just making breakfast if you want some." "Where are Will and Phil?" Tommy asked, still unsure if this was reality or not. "Doing work stuff. You know how it is." Techno shrugged. "They'll be back in a few hours, though." Huh. Everything seemed normal enough. It wasn't unusual for Tommy to wake up to one or more of the Soot members missing because they were off doing work-related stuff. Not to mention, the floor was still cold, and the nails he was digging into his palms still hurt. It didn't feel like a dream at all. "Okay," Tommy said, his shoulders slackening a bit as he slid into a chair at the kitchen island counter. "What are you making?" Techno held up the pan for him to see. "Hash browns. If you want eggs, I can make some for you too, but I was planning on just eating these." "Just hash browns is fine, thank you," Tommy said, tapping his fingers along the granite countertop. Techno hummed and looked back to the pan, using the spatula to flip the potatoes every once in a while. As the minutes passed in relative peace, Tommy began to relax more and more. It seemed like he'd finally woken up from that trippy-ass dream, and he couldn't be more relieved. Still, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of his head, that there was something important he was forgetting about. Something that was wrong with the scene in front of him. Suddenly, Techno let out a hiss of pain, and Tommy was pulled out of his thoughts. "Damn it," Techno hissed, holding his left pan while moving the pan off the stove. He walked over to the sink and turned the faucet on, sticking his bright red palm underneath the cold water. Tommy didn't think before he was standing up to walk over to the sink. "Here, I can help," he said to Techno. Techno raised an eyebrow at him. While Tommy hadn't technically told Techno and Phil about his healing powers, he'd assumed that Wilbur would have mentioned it at some point. But judging by the skepticism on Techno's face, he wasn't so sure anymore. Either way, though, he trusted Techno. It wasn't like he had a problem with him knowing, and he figured it would have come up eventually. Besides, he wasn't just gonna let the man deal with a burn on his hand when Tommy could fix it in seconds. He knew all too well how burns on your hands could be annoying as hell thanks to that stupid espresso machine. "Give me your hand," Tommy said, holding out his own. Techno frowned but didn't say anything as he gave Tommy his injured hand. Tommy eyed the burn, wincing at the shiny, bright red skin that was already starting to peel. "Why, Cody, why?" As gently as he could, he placed his own hand on top of the burn and closed his eyes as energy began to pour out of him. There was a familiar orange glow behind his eyes. It only took a few seconds for the burn to disappear, and when Tommy let go of the hand, his only side effect was a lingering warmth in his own fingers. "You're a healer," Techno said, staring at his palm with an unreadable expression. "Sure am, big man," Tommy replied, smiling at him. "Well, that's pretty good, I suppose," Techno huffed, dropping his hand back down to his side. "Gives you some actual use around here instead of just taking up space." The words hit Tommy like a punch to the chest. He reeled back, meeting Techno's flat stare, and wondering if this was some kind of mean joke he wasn't understanding. It was possible that this was just another one of Techno's deadpan quips he just wasn't reading correctly, but it didn't feel like the man's usual jabs. "What? Is that a joke?" Tommy asked, his voice small. "No. All you do around here is eat our food and take up space. At least as a healer, you can do something for us instead of just being a mooch," Techno continued, meeting his gaze calmly. "I mean, why else would people keep you around? You know how annoying you are." Tommy winced at the cruel words thrown his way, wrapping his arms around himself as he tried to shove down the burning in his eyes. Of course he knew he was annoying. All his foster families had told him that dozens of times over. It wasn't a secret that people didn't like him at first, but he never thought he'd hear Techno say the same thing to him. "But I thought you guys didn't mind having me here." Tommy's question came out as more of a squeak, but his thoughts were spiraling too much to let him be embarrassed about it. Techno snorted. "Nah, Will just wanted us to tell you that so you'd be willing to stick around. After all, it's not like he wants to get rid of a healer either." Tommy gulped. "That's not true. Wilbur doesn't find me annoying." "Are you sure?" Techno raised an eyebrow. "Or do you think he just knows a good opportunity when he sees one?" No, that couldn't be true. Wilbur had befriended Tommy and started inviting him out long before he knew Tommy had healing powers. He only found out about Tommy's powers the first day he came over to the Soot House. Unless he was Siren. Then he would have known about Tommy's powers the first time he came into the cafe. But Wilbur wasn't Siren. Sure, they were similar, but the two weren't the same, and he refused to believe that. "You're lying," Tommy choked out, his throat closing in on itself. "If you want to keep believing in your little fairy tales, you can. I'm just trying to tell you the truth since no one else will." Techno huffed, stepping back over to the pan and resuming his cooking. Tommy stumbled away from the kitchen, his eyes burning as he tried to fight the tears threatening to pour down his cheeks. Techno found him annoying, and he claimed Wilbur and Phil did too. Had it really all been just a lie? An act made up to keep their precious healer close? No, it didn't make sense. Wilbur didn't find out about his healing powers until they'd already become friends because he wasn't Siren. Tommy leaned against the opposite wall to Techno. The man had gone back to his cooking, seemingly uncaring about the breakdown Tommy was having. There was a twinge in Tommy's palm as he wrapped his arms around himself, and he realized he'd been digging his nails even harder into his palms than he meant to. Looking at the skin on his hand, Tommy felt the familiar tingling in his blood telling him to heal the wounds. But there was something off about his hand. He'd broken the skin with his nails. There were half-moon crescent shapes dotted around his palm, but there was no blood spilling out. Reaching down, he gently tugged on one of the crescent moons. He gently tugged one of the crescent moons apart and saw that, yep, he'd definitely broken the skin. But the blood flowing underneath was staying in place, not dripping out on the floor. That wasn't normal. Wait. The puzzle pieces fell into place when Tommy heard his own laughter ring throughout the kitchen again. Okay, sorry. I'm done for real this time, I promise, the other Tommy said, stepping into the kitchen from the garage. I don't even want to talk to you right now. Just please wake me up, Tommy whispered, closing his eyes and leaning against the wall. Will do, big man, the other him replied. And once again, the world faded out. There was darkness. He could feel his heart thumping steadily in his chest. Warm blankets were wrapped around him. A hand was gripping his own. Tommy's eyes flew open, gasping awake like a man returned from the dead. He whipped his head around, seeing that he was in his own room still, but he wasn't alone this time. Wilbur had a chair pulled up next to the bed. There were deep bags under his eyes, and he had his hand wrapped around Tommy's, holding him like he was afraid he would float away. Tommy's head was spinning as he was overwhelmed with relief that the things Techno said were just part of those fucked up dreams. But he still wasn't sure if he was awake or not. Will? Tommy whispered, his voice strangely hoarse. Wilbur's eyes widened as he met Tommy's gaze, a bright smile spreading across his face. Holy shit! Tom's, you're awake! Oh my god, we've been so worried! Worried? Tommy asked, frowning. The smile fell from Wilbur's face. Do you not remember what happened? What do you mean? Something troubled settled over Wilbur's expression. Dream kidnapped you. We were on the phone when it happened. And suddenly it all came flooding back. Talking with Nemesis and Thanatos, helping Monarch and Aurelion, talking to Wilbur about what movie to watch when he got home, only to be greeted with a porcelain smile and smiling face and a pair of white goggles. Holy shit. He'd been kidnapped by Dream and 404. Holy fuck, I remember, Tommy whispered, sitting up to wrap his arms around himself. I don't remember what happened after 404 put me to sleep, though. Wilbur pressed his lips into a thin line. You got rescued by the Syndicate, but you were stuck with Dream for a few days. You were unconscious when they found you, and no one was able to wake you up. We think it might have been 404's ability keeping you in some sort of coma, but I guess it finally wore off. Shit, that made sense. Although Tommy wasn't sure why 404 would keep him in a coma for the entirety of his captivity, maybe he and Dream had planned to use him as a bargaining chip with the Syndicate? Although from what Wilbur said, that didn't seem... Wait. You know about the Syndicate? Tommy whispered, staring at Wilbur with wide eyes. Wilbur nodded. Yeah, I know. And you're Siren? He wanted to ask, but he didn't want to ask that either, because after that dream with Techno, he was terrified of the implications that would come with Wilbur being Siren. Maybe he wanted to believe that Wilbur actually cared about him just for a little while longer. And you're okay with that? No, and you're okay with that? He asked instead, bringing his knees up to his chest. Wilbur's face softened. Of course I am. You were helping people, trying to do what was right. I don't have a problem with that at all. Tommy breathed a sigh of relief, even as his suspicions continued to linger in the back of his mind. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, he whispered. You don't have anything to apologize for, Wilbur reassured him. I'm just glad you're okay. And despite the little voice in the back of his head screaming at him that Wilbur didn't actually care, that Wilbur was just using him, Tommy found himself leaning forward anyway. Wilbur hugged him tightly, and Tommy buried his face into his shoulder, letting himself sink into his older brother's warmth. He was okay. Dream wasn't here, and he had been rescued. He was safe. Everything was fine. Still hugging Wilbur, Tommy lifted his head out of Wilbur's shoulder and blinked open his eyes, gaze flickering towards the window by his bed. Then he froze. Because when he looked out the glass panes, Tommy realized he couldn't see anything outside. It was as if there was a white void sitting outside his window. It wasn't fog. Fog was never this thick and this opaque. Instead, it seemed like the entire soot house was sitting in a chunk of a video game that hadn't loaded yet. An empty space of pure nothingness. Tommy was still hugging Wilbur, and he could feel Wilbur's hands carting through his hair. He wanted to sink into it, to not think about the void outside the glass and let himself be comforted by his brother. But the nagging feeling in the back of his head had turned into full-on shouting. This wasn't real. Tommy was still dreaming. And if his memory was right and he had really been kidnapped by Dream in 404, then he knew exactly why his dreams had been so fucked. Tommy pulled away from the hug. Wilbur let out a noise of confusion, but Tommy ignored it as he shoved the blankets off his legs and stumbled to his feet. Where are you going? Wilbur asked as Tommy headed to the door. To find someone, Tommy replied, swinging open the door to his bedroom and rushing into the hall. 404 was an interesting hero for sure. Unlike Dream, he didn't do many things for publicity, preferring to stay out of the public eye unless Dream dragged him to some press conference or interview. But more than that, the most interesting thing about 404 was his power, and how unique it was compared to most. 404 had the ability to make people fall asleep with a single touch, but it wasn't just that. He could also enter someone's mind while they slept and manipulate their dreams. While this aspect of his abilities wasn't often used in fights, it was one of the Hero Committee's preferred methods of interrogating suspects, given how it wasn't torture, which was obviously illegal, yet it was extremely effective. 404 would enter the suspect's dreams and manipulate the dreams into revealing the information he needed. Where the fuck are you, you stupid bastard? Tommy screamed into the house, whipping his head around for any sign of the other Tommy. Tommy, what's going on? Wilbur asked, standing in the doorway to his room. Just 1 second. I'm not having any of that shit in my Twitch chat. Alright, where was I? Stop hiding like a pussy and talk to me! Tommy shouted again, ignoring the fake Wilbur completely. Mate, what's going on? Phil asked, appearing on the stairs. Is something wrong? Techno chimed in, looking as though he was ready to fight someone. Tommy laughed, as it was a horrible grating sound. That piece of shit was really going all out to try and convince him this was real, wasn't he? I'm not falling for this shit again, Tommy yelled, not even acknowledging Phil and Techno's presence. I know I'm dreaming, so get the fuck out here! Tommy, you're not dreaming, Phil told him in a gentle voice, holding his hands up placatingly. I know you're probably freaked out after the dream took you, but... Stop it! Tommy snapped. I'm not stupid! I know this isn't real! He backed up until he hit the railing of the stairs, shrinking back as Techno, Phil, and Wilbur all began to close in on him. Just calm down and take a moment to breathe, Wilbur said. I promise we got you out. But you didn't! I know you didn't because I can tell this isn't real! Tommy insisted. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't. But he wasn't. This wasn't real, or else he'd be able to see outside the windows. You fucked up the windows again, 404. That's how I know. Tommy, tell us what's wrong with the windows. Techno was talking as though he were speaking to a scared animal. And in a way, Tommy figured that's what he was right now. A scared animal trapped in a corner, ready to bite his way out if that's what it came down to. I can't see out of them, he explained. There's nothing outside, it's just white fucking void. Techno opened his mouth again, but Tommy spoke before he could. You're not going to be able to convince me otherwise. I know I'm right. There was a beat of silence, and then, just like that, Techno, Wilbur, and Phil all froze in place, as if a pause button had been hit on them. The door to Wilbur's bedroom opened, and Tommy watched the other Tommy stroll out with a grin on his face. I'll admit, I wasn't expecting you to figure it out this time, the other him taunted. Narrowing his eyes, Tommy shoved past the Tommy shoved past the frozen figures and barreled straight into the copy of himself. With a loud shriek, he slammed the other Tommy against the wall, holding his arm up on his chest to press him back into the plaster. This isn't going to work! I figured it out, you fucking bastard! Tommy hissed. The other Tommy laughed, not trying to fight against the grip Tommy had on him. Then, as if a Photoshop layer was being turned down in opacity, Tommy watched as his own face faded away, leaving 404 in place of the other Tommy. Well, it was worth a shot, don't you think? 404 said, now speaking in his own voice. Sure it was, but it didn't fucking work, you lame-ass bitch. Tommy shot back, pressing the hero further into the wall. So, let me wake up for real this time. 404 shrugged. Alright, I can do that. But just trust me when I tell you that this would have been a much easier way of doing things. And once again, the world began to fade to black around Tommy, but something about it felt different this time. It was heavier, as if the darkness was quite literally swallowing him whole. Then everything went dark and Tommy was gone. Tommy's head hurt. His ears were ringing as he slowly came to. He was sitting on something hard and cold, and his back ached from where he was hunched over. Blinking open his eyes, the first thing he saw was his feet being tied to the legs of a wooden chair. When Tommy tried to move his arms, he was met with resistance, and realized his wrists were tied down as well. Then he heard footsteps walking towards him, and his heart leapt into his throat. Whipping his head up, he saw Dream walking towards the chair he was tied to. They seemed to be in some sort of abandoned warehouse with rotting wood walls and stained concrete floors. Behind Dream, 404 was leaning against a wall, smirking at him. Tommy would have flipped him off if he was able to lift his hand. "Tommy, I'm glad to see you're finally awake. Did you sleep well?" Dream asked, leaning down so he was at eye level with Tommy. Tommy narrowed his eyes. "What the hell are you planning on doing with me besides fucking with my dreams?" Dream leaned closer, and despite the mask, Tommy could tell he was smiling underneath it as well. "That's an easy one. We just want to ask you a few questions," Dream explained. "What, like an interrogation?" Tommy asked, deepening his scowl so Dream couldn't see the fear those words struck into him. "It doesn't have to be an interrogation. We don't want this to turn ugly, so if you just answer our questions, it'll be easier for all of us," Dream told him, resting a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "The Syndicate has hurt a lot of people, and I just want to stop them from doing that anymore." Fucking bastard. Acting like he was the good guy when he tried to kill everyone in the Syndicate 10 times over. "What do you want to know?" Tommy pushed. Dream squeezed his shoulder, but it wasn't like when Wilbur or Siren did it. It wasn't meant as a gesture of comfort, but as a threat. "I want you to tell me the civilian identities of everyone in the Syndicate." That's the funny thing, is he only knows one of them, so not much help from you there, buddy boy. Wait. Let's see. I want to clarify something. George does not control Dreams completely. He didn't know anything about Tommy's relationship with the family prior. Tommy's subconscious provides the dream and the information about the people in it. George can just push Dreams in certain directions. It's not like George is speaking through Techno or Wilbur at any point. He can just push Tommy's subconscious to highlight things he's already thinking and worried about. Oh, wow. Next chapter. Chapter 18, Questioning. Summary. Dream and Tommy talk. Trigger warnings for this chapter. Brief mentions of past child abuse. Okay. So if any of you in chat are triggered at all by mentions of child abuse, I will not be upset if you leave stream. It's okay. And with that, let's continue on. I want you to tell me the identities of everyone in the Syndicate. Dream's words echoed in his mind, sending a shiver down Tommy's spine as he struggled to keep his expression neutral. He could admit the truth. He didn't know the identities of anyone in the Syndicate, save for Nemesis's name. They had been so careful to keep that from him just in case a situation like this came up. But judging by Dream's tone, the way he was leaning into Tommy like a predator assessing their prey, Tommy had a feeling he wasn't going to believe him even if he told the truth. So instead, Tommy did the next most logical thing he could think of. He spit on Dream's mask. Sorry, I just love the brunt, like the bluntness of that sentence. There was a heavy silence as Dream stared blankly at Tommy. Tommy's spit trailing down the front of the porcelain. Then, Dream took a deep breath and straightened up, and Tommy braced himself to be slapped. That's what they did in interrogations, right? He was probably about to get the shit slapped out of him. Dream curled his hands into fists, but then took a second, very deliberate breath as if he was struggling to keep his composure. That was rude, Tommy said in a flat voice. There's your answer, Tommy hissed, narrowing his eyes at the hero. I'm not telling you shit, bitch. His heart was about to beat out of his chest, and if he hadn't been tied down to the chair, he was certain he wouldn't be able to stand because his legs were shaking so badly. But Dream didn't need to know that. He didn't give a shit what the hero did to him. He wasn't going to give up his friends. Dream let out a low chuckle, and it was bone-chilling to hear. This man was the complete opposite of the number one hero he'd watched give him lectures about responsibility and detention. This was the real Dream, one who was determined to get what he wanted by any means necessary. You're loyal. The Syndicate got lucky in finding you, Dream commented, reaching behind him for his cape. He used the edge of the dark green fabric to wipe the spit off his mask before letting it flutter back down around his ankles. Or is it that you're afraid of them? Afraid of what they'll do to you if you reveal their secrets? Because if that's the case, Tommy, I can keep you safe. You'd never have to worry about the Syndicate again if you were to help me. Tommy scoffed. I'm not afraid of them, dickwad. Maybe he had been afraid in the beginning. Afraid of saying no to their offers. Afraid of what they might do if he refused to help them. But things were different now. Tommy wasn't afraid of them at all. But was he afraid for them? Yes, very much so. Which was why he wasn't going to give Dream anything. Not if he could help it. So it's the first one then. Loyalty. Dream folded his arms across his chest. That one's tougher. Breaking manipulation always is. At this, Tommy frowned. Manipulation? I haven't been manipulated. Yes, you have, Dream said, his tone gentle as though he were speaking to a child. You don't realize it, but they've been manipulating you to their side, to see them as the good guys and me as the bad guy. Oh, fuck off. You're not gonna get anywhere trying to gaslight me or whatever the fuck. Tommy snapped. What? I'm not trying to gaslight you, Tommy. I'm trying to help you, Dream exclaimed, and there was such a genuine note of concern there that it almost made Tommy falter. The Syndicate's been pulling you to their side, getting you involved in something you should have never been involved in. I mean, for fuck's sake, you're just a kid. For a moment, Tommy blinked in surprise. Of all the things he had expected the hero to bring up, he hadn't once considered that Dream would care that he's a kid. No, that didn't matter. Dream didn't actually care. He was just trying to make Tommy think that he did. He wouldn't fall for it. Pretty bold of you to go around kidnapping children as the number one hero, Tommy pointed out. Dream sighed. I didn't have any other choice. I couldn't get a warrant to arrest you, and if I just tried talking to you, the Syndicate would have been on my ass in seconds. Then untie me if you just want to talk, Tommy challenged. I can't do that because you'll just try to run away. Tommy snorted. Damn right I would. Whatever you might think of the Syndicate, they didn't kidnap me. But didn't they? Dream asked, cocking his head to the side. Maybe not literally, but they pulled you into their world, got you to work with them as their healer until you were so deep in you couldn't escape. Tommy clenched his jaw. That wasn't true. Sure, Blade had forced him to heal Zephyrus once, but that was the only time he'd really been forced to heal someone. He hadn't been dragged into the Syndicate against his will, right? It didn't matter now. He didn't regret getting involved with the Syndicate. Not anymore. They never forced me to do anything I didn't want to do, he said. It was a slight lie, but again, his hand had only been forced once. It was close enough to the truth that it sounded genuine on his tongue. Besides, they wouldn't have been so desperate for a healer if you weren't trying to kill them every time you got into a fight. Dream huffed at that. You think I want to have to go that far? I'd love to be able to focus on incapacitating villains, but when they're trying to kill me? Or my friends? I mean, I'm sure you saw Nemesis almost kill Flame. If I hadn't stepped in, he would have died. Only because Flame almost killed Thanatos, Tommy argued. Did you see that fight? When Nemesis and Thanatos still went by Arson and Iceman, and Flame was sent out on his own to go take care of them? No, but I saw the aftermath. I nearly passed out when I healed Thanatos from those burns, Tommy told him. How do you know that wasn't self-defense on Flame's end? Dream then asked. Villains attack us, and we act in self-defense. Sometimes we have to go to extreme lengths to protect ourselves. I don't like it, but it's the way things are. What the hell kind of threat could Siren have posed to you that meant you had to shove a pipe through his fucking stomach? Tommy snarled, remembering that fateful night in the alley that started all this. Dream stared at him for a moment, and Tommy tried not to squirm in his seat. You don't realize how dangerous your friends are, do you? I'm not an idiot. Of course I do. Tommy shot back. He'd seen plenty of news reports on the Syndicate in the past. He'd seen the kinds of things they could all do, the battles they'd won, the lack of mercy they showed their enemies. It was precisely why he'd been so terrified of them in the beginning. And yet you still choose to help them? They're murderers, Tommy. Don't you see that? Tommy opened his mouth to argue, but Dream made a tisking noise and shook his head before he could. Tell me how many people you think Siren's killed, he challenged. Tommy blinked. Of course he knew that Siren had killed people before, but he hadn't actually thought of specific numbers. I'm not sure, Tommy admitted. Dream reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He tapped a few times on the screen before turning it to face Tommy, showing him grainy security footage down by the ports in South Bay. The video started to play. Tommy watched as Zephyrus and Blade fought against armored police officers, the two moving with a type of fluidity and synchronization that only came from years of working together. Blade would send his sword slicing through the air, and Zephyrus would lift higher than the blade without needing to be told. Zephyrus would swoop down from his flight to snatch someone up, and Blade would lift his sword to send his sword straight into their middle. It was almost like a dance. But there were a lot of police officers. If Tommy had to guess, he might even say there were 100 of them. And despite how powerful Zephyrus and Blade were, there were only 2 of them. Tommy's breathing hitched when a bullet ripped into Zephyrus' side, and he came crashing to the ground. Blade was immediately on him, shielding him with his body as the police advanced with their guns drawn. Then, a honey-coated voice broke through the staticky white noise of the video footage. Stop, Siren ordered, as he suddenly appeared beside Zephyrus and Blade, making all the police officers freeze in place. Tommy stared at the video with wide eyes, his heart dropping into his stomach at Siren's next words. Kill each other, until there's no one left standing. And just like that, the police officers turned on each other, Bright flashes exploded across the screen as the officers shot each other over and over, their black-armored bodies collapsing into piles like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Blade dragged Zephyrus off screen, while Siren stayed to watch the chaos unfold. Although Siren was someone Tommy trusted wholeheartedly, it was in that moment that he remembered exactly who Siren was. Watching his dark coat billow in the breeze blowing in from the sea, his expression unreadable under his mask as he watched these officers murder each other under his orders, a shiver ran down Tommy's spine. When there was only one officer left standing, the sole survivor of the chaos, Siren stepped over the bodies until he was standing right in front of the man. "Now kill yourself." The officer didn't hesitate as he pressed his gun to his chin and pulled the trigger. When Siren turned back around, Tommy saw blood splattered across his face and felt bile rise in his throat. Dream pulled the phone away from him, clicking out of the video and pocketing it once again. Then he stared down at Tommy, his smiley face gaze as unreadable as ever. "What did you think?" he asked, as if that was some sort of film he'd shown Tommy and wanted to get his opinion on. Tommy grit his teeth as he tried to hide the nausea that was rolling over him like a wave. He'd known that Siren killed people before. The media talked about how he could control entire crowds, and took full advantage of that ability whenever it was necessary. This wasn't news to Tommy. He'd just never seen footage like that before. Usually the news would only show small clips of Siren's mass mind control before cutting away, citing that the footage was often too graphic to show on live TV. Now he understood why. What were they doing down by the ports, before the police officers showed up? Tommy asked, struggling to keep his voice level. There was a warehouse there that had just received a shipment of highly dangerous weapons designed for hero use, like 404's knives or my swords. The Syndicate was trying to steal them, Dream explained. How long ago did that happen? Dream tapped his finger against the bottom edge of his mask and thought. A few months ago, I think. Something cold settled into Tommy's gut at that. A few months ago, Zephyrus and Blade showed up at his apartment for the first time, and Zephyrus had a bullet wound in his side. According to them, Siren was busy doing something else, which is why he'd given Blade Tommy's address so he could heal Zephyrus. That's what Siren had been doing, taking care of those police officers while Blade dragged Zephyrus to his apartment. A part of Tommy was tempted to ask Dream for a bucket so he could throw up into it. But he took shaky breaths, refusing to let Dream see how much this was getting to him. He knew the Syndicate did things like this beforehand. This wasn't news to him. Why was he so affected by this? He knew it was because there was a difference between hearing about the horrible things the Syndicate did and actually seeing them with his own eyes. But even as the cold horror settled onto his shoulders like a physical weight, he had to remind himself that this was what Dream wanted. Dream was trying to shake his loyalty to the Syndicate. Besides, Zephyrus had been injured. Of course Siren was going to resort to drastic measures when they were surrounded on all sides, with Zephyrus hurt and the group of officers crowding in on them. He didn't need to go that far, though. He could have made them all fall asleep. A traitorous voice in his mind whispered. No, this was what Dream wanted him to think. Tommy knew that even if Siren was a villain, he still deserved to be healed. All of them did. If you think showing me shitty security camera footage is gonna make me break that easily, you've got another thing coming, Tommy said, meeting Dream's mask with a silent challenge in his eyes. Dream chuckled. You're stubborn. Good to know. Suddenly, 404 appeared at Dream's side, resting a hand on the taller hero's shoulder. Ask him about his brother, 404 told him, smirking at Tommy. I saw it in his dreams. There's some sore spots in the family. Tommy frowned. Brother? Family? Who the hell was 404 talking about? He hadn't seen Tubbo or Rambu in his dreams at all. What's his name? Dream asked, glancing at 404. Wilbur? 404 replied, looking so self-satisfied. He was like the cat that had just gotten the cream. Oh. It seemed like even though he'd been able to manipulate his dreams and watch what happened in them, 404 wasn't able to read his thoughts during them. He'd just seen his interactions with Wilbur and assumed that Wilbur was his brother, not that Wilbur possibly had any connection to Siren. Thank God. That was one less thing he had to worry about. But now Wilbur could be a target if they thought he was Tommy's family, so he squashed down the warmth in his chest that still showed up at Wilbur being referred to as his brother, and forced himself to let out a sarcastic laugh. You think Wilbur's my brother? He asked, matching 404's smirk with one of his own. You might be able to see my dreams, but you really don't understand shit, do you? 404 frowned, his smirk disappearing. Wait, he's not your brother? No, he's just a friend of mine. I met him at work, Tommy explained, trying to sound as flippant as possible in the hopes that they would think Wilbur wasn't important to him. But you had a room at his house, 404 pointed out. Yeah, his family's been letting me stay with him for the past few weeks because my living situation is a bit shit right now. That's all, though. He's not my family or anything, Tommy said, and although it was the truth, it felt like lies passing between his teeth. So he's not important to you? Dream asked, folding his arms over his chest. Tommy didn't like the way he asked the question, but kept his expression still as he shrugged. I mean, he's my friend, of course, but I wouldn't say he's that important to me. So you wouldn't mind if we paid him a visit? Dream pushed, and Tommy felt every cell in his body freeze at that. Just to chat with him, ask if he knows anything about your side job. His heart raced in his ears. Dream was just bluffing him. He wasn't actually going to visit Wilbur. I mean, I don't think that's necessary. I don't want him to find out about all this stuff. The last thing he needs is to get involved in it, Tommy said, his veneer of forced casualness slipping fast. Nah, I think he's already involved in it thanks to you, Dream replied. That's the consequence of working with villains. Anyone you care about is going to get dragged into their problems right along with you. I know what he looks like. 404 jumped in, pulling out his phone. Shouldn't be too hard to find his file. How many people are even named Wilbur these days, anyway? Good to know. Maybe we can even bring him here to join you, Tommy. For all we know, maybe he saw the syndicate one night when you were leaving the cafe. Tommy clenched his jaw. They were just bluffing. That was all. Found his file, 404 declared after a few beats of silence, lifting his phone in the air with a triumphant grin. Wilbur Soot. He lives in South Bay with his dad and his brother. Let's see that address, Dream hummed, leaning over to look at 404's phone screen. Oh yeah, shouldn't take too long for us to get there. No! Tommy shouted, cutting them both off. Shit. They knew Wilbur's name, and they knew where he lived. It might not be a bluff, and if it wasn't, then Wilbur was going to get hurt because of him. Because of his shit. He couldn't let that happen. Dream glanced up from the phone and hummed. Oh? You don't want us to do that? Don't you fucking touch him, Tommy snarled. Him and his family have nothing to do with this shit, okay? 404 and Dream shared a knowing look. Seems like 404 hit the nail on the head with the brother comment, Dream said, sounding amused. Fuck you, Tommy spat. Your problem is with me helping the syndicate, right? Wilbur's got nothing to do with that, so leave him the fuck alone. How about this? Dream began, taking a step towards Tommy. You start answering my questions, and if you don't, we'll go find your brother and see if he knows anything. Tommy gulped. He'd fucked himself over, and now they knew they could use Wilbur as leverage against him. Fuck. Shit. Fucking shit. But I don't know anything, Tommy admitted, looking up at Dream with pleading eyes. I don't know the syndicate's identities. They never told me anything, just in case something like this happened. Now that's bullshit, Dream said, resting a hand on Tommy's shoulder. You've been working with them for months. They trust you completely. There's no way they never let anything slip. Tommy thought of Nemesis, and how he had her real name, Nikki, floating in his mind. He thought of Siren and how with each passing day, it was getting harder and harder not to compare him to Wilbur. No, he wasn't giving those things up. I don't know anything, I swear, Tommy whined. Please, Dream, they never told me shit. I was even blindfolded the day they brought me to their secret base because they didn't want me to know the way. The grip on his shoulder tightened, and Tommy felt his body tremble as Dream leaned down so they were face to face again. I don't like liars, he said quietly. There was a beat of silence as Tommy waited for Dream to make a move. He wasn't going to break. Fuck him. Suddenly, the tense silence was shattered like glass as a phone began to ring. Tommy breathed a sigh of relief as Dream straightened up, patting his pockets until he pulled out his phone. His ringtone was obnoxiously loud, and Tommy wondered who the hell even had their phone off silent these days. Dream sighed when he glanced at the screen. 404, keep an eye on him. I need to take this. And I need to... 1 second. Wait. There we go. I felt it. 404 nodded as Dream took a few steps away from the chair, holding the phone up to his ear as he answered the call. Hey, Flame, he said in greeting, the mention of the other hero making Tommy instantly straighten to attention. Yeah, we're in public right now. We're patrolling down in East Side. A pause. Yeah, of course everything's fine. There's just been some sightings, nothing usual. Another pause. No, we haven't seen anything. Did you hear about anything going on? No? Then why does he want me back at the tower? I mean, does it have to be right now? Shit. Fine. Okay, I'll be there soon. Dream hung up. Seems like our conversation is going to have to be cut short because I'm being called back to the Hero Tower, he told Tommy. Tommy couldn't stop the next words that came out of his mouth. Flame doesn't know about me. 404 twisted his lips into a scowl while Dream sighed. That's not for you to know. I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious. You lied to him about where you are and what you're doing. If Flame knew you'd kidnapped me, you would have just told him. Tommy snorted, a strange sense of satisfaction washing over him at the knowledge that the heroes weren't as put together as they pretended to be. Kinda funny, innit? You, 404, and Flame are supposed to be the dream team or whatever the fuck. But I bet Flame wouldn't be happy if you found out you kidnapped a teenager. Is that it? He's not as fucked in the head as you two. Shut up! Dream shouted, his voice echoing around the warehouse and making Tommy jump in his seat. He stormed back towards Tommy's chair as he twisted his fingers into his hair, making Tommy yelp as he pulled their faces close. Don't talk about shit you don't know the first thing about. While Tommy's heart was just about to pound out of his chest as his head throbbed where Dream was grabbing it, he found himself grinning wildly at the hero. This is all gonna blow up in your face soon enough, asshole. You're not nearly as in control as you think you are. There was a low growl in Dream's throat, and Tommy's grin widened. Do it, you fucking pussy. Hit me. I know you want to. It was a familiar mantra, one he'd said to old foster parents when he'd had just enough of walking on eggshells, when he just wanted to get to the bad part and stop hovering in a terrified limbo of will they or won't they. Dream stared at him for a moment, and Tommy could hear his harsh breathing through his mask. Then, the hand let go of his hair, and Dream was storming away from him. Keep an eye on him, 404, and don't try your dream shit on him again. It's not going to work a second time. You got it, Dream, 404 replied, leaning back against the wall, looking like the picture of boredom. Dream disappeared around the corner, and Tommy distantly heard a door being slammed. Now alone with 404, Tommy turned his gaze towards the white goggles. So, how's the bathroom situation supposed to work? Do I just gotta tell you when I need to piss? Or, if you don't shut up, I'm putting you to sleep again? 404 cut him off. Tommy sighed. Well, this was going to be boring. That statement turned out to be truer than expected. Dream didn't come back for the rest of the day. Tommy watched the sun pass overhead one of the dusty windows set high against the warehouse walls. Its crawl up and up painfully slow as the hours passed on. His arms and legs were horribly sore from being tied to the chair for so long. Eventually he started to complain to 404, who looked just as bored as he was. But it didn't take long for 404 to get sick of his whining. This time, Tommy didn't dream when 404 put him to sleep. Instead, he woke up when the sky was just turning the soft gray of dawn. He couldn't feel his arms and legs anymore, and figured that was at least better than them being sore the whole time. Dream showed up before the sun had fully risen. Tommy expected the interrogation to resume, but Dream seemed strangely tired. His voice was subdued, and he kept running his hands down his mask as if he was rubbing sleep out of his eyes. 404 left after Dream showed up, saying that he would be back in a few hours, but he needed to get cleaned up and check in at the Hero Tower. Once he was gone, nervousness settled over Tommy like prickling over his skin, waiting for Dream to make a move now that the two were alone. But to his surprise, instead of standing up and threatening him again, Dream just sat on the floor leaning against a nearby wall. Do you know why the Hero Committee exists, Tommy? Dream asked, something weary bleeding through his tone. To protect the rich from villains and fuck everyone else over? Tommy shot back, raising an eyebrow. Dream chuckled, although it sounded sad. No, although I can see why you might think that. He paused, wringing his hands in his laps. Heroes were created to protect the city from individuals who used their abilities to get power over others. At first, it was just because standard police officers couldn't always fight back against bank robbers or crime organizations who had individuals with very strong abilities in their ranks. But when highly powered people were made heroes and given the tools to fight back against these criminals, the criminals in turn organized themselves as well. That's how we started the hero versus villain narrative. Tommy rolled his eyes. That's not all it is anymore though, prick. It's not about protecting civilians. It hasn't been for a long time. It's about getting one up on each other, trying to defeat the other by any means necessary, even if civilians get hurt in the collateral damage. It's harder than you think, trying to take down a man with literal invincibility like the Blade, without needing to damage a few buildings. Dream pointed out. I would love it if we could contain the fights better, if we could minimize damages while still keeping our heads up in fights. But it doesn't work like that. I remember when you made that office building collapse with all those people inside it? Tommy snapped. You just had to take out one of the support beams because you had no other choice. But people died because of you, Dream. Innocent people who weren't involved in this shit. Dream's shoulders tensed at that. That was a terrible accident, he murmured, looking down at his lap. I had no idea that the building was unstable. Usually there's redundancies for some port beams. You can take out one and the others will still hold. If I'd known, I never would have pulled out that beam. Even through the voice modulator, Tommy could hear genuine sorrow in Dream's voice as he spoke. But you still did it. You didn't even manage to get a scratch on Blade in the end. Tommy said, his frown deepening. You say you're protecting civilians, but who are you really protecting in the end? So what? You think we should just let villains run wild? Should I have just not tried to stop Jester from robbing that casino? He killed 3 hostages, Dream argued. You only cared about that because those gamblers were rich. Tommy scoffed. People get mugged and hurt all the time in Eastside, and I never see you hero fucks patrolling down there. Dream huffed. You think we have freedom over where we patrol? I can't just say, oh, I want to patrol in Eastside tonight. The Hero Committee is largely funded by donations from people who live in West End. We're given schedules from the city for where we have to patrol and for how long. And more often than not, it's usually centered in the areas where our biggest donors live. Oh, please, you're the #1 hero. What are they gonna do if you go patrol in Eastside one night instead of West End? It's not like they're gonna fire you. Being the #1 hero doesn't grant you as much freedom as you think it does. Why do you think the captain retired? She got sick of not being able to do the kind of work she wanted to do, so she left. Dream explained, finally looking up to meet Tommy's eyes. I know the committee has problems, but I think it's more effective to try and do what I can instead of just leaving entirely. Many had suspected that the captain's retirement had something to do with her disapproval for the way the Hero Committee worked. Although she wasn't a very public figure who refused to do interviews unless she had no other choice, there had been rumors that she frequently had gotten into arguments with higher-ups, with her ultimately leaving when they couldn't reconcile. Now Dream claimed to be in the same position. He wanted to help, but he was restricted by the Hero Committee. It was frustrating for Tommy because while he wanted to dismiss anything Dream said outright, he also could hear at least some grains of truth in what he was saying. That still doesn't give you the right to try and kill villains, though, Tommy said, narrowing his eyes at Dream. Not when you lie and say you only aim to incapacitate. You don't understand, Tommy. It's kill or be killed out there, Dream explained, the beady black eyes on his mask boring into Tommy's head. Tommy met his gaze head on. Then why did the warden become a villain? He asked coolly. When Dream straightened up at the question, Tommy knew he'd hit his mark. The warden was a complicated situation, Dream said, stepping over his words with the care of walking through a minefield. He was like the captain in that he didn't like the way things were run, but the syndicate had managed to talk to him got into his head and fed him lies about how they were the ones doing the right thing, how the system was corrupt and the only way to fix it was to destroy it completely. And so the warden turned against us during a fight, and when our healer Supreme tried to stop him, he hurt him. Badly. Wait, Supreme... Who would Supreme be? Because 404 is George. I would have assumed that Supreme is George because he has knockoff Supreme merch as his Minecraft skin. Who else is on the Dream SMP? Puns, maybe? No, Puns is a mercenary. Or a hitman or something. I don't know which one it is in this story. Punk? Maybe? Who knows? Tommy thought of Daedalus with his soft voice and gentle tone. The way he spoke so fondly of his dog, and how he listened to Tommy's rambling with a surprising amount of patience, and how he never spoke ill of the heroes he used to work with. On the rare occasions, Tommy had tried to ask Daedalus about his switching roles, but he only ever spoke of it as a necessary thing he had to do, something he couldn't see an alternative for. Daedalus thinks he's doing the right thing, Tommy said, tapping his fingers against the arm of the chair. Everyone thinks they're the one in the right, Dream replied, slumping further against the wall. Do you think the Syndicate is in the right, Tommy? Tommy bit the inside of his cheek as he turned the question over in his mind. The Syndicate wasn't good, but neither was the Hero Committee. He still didn't know what the Syndicate's true goal was, but Dream claimed his goal was to stop the Syndicate from hurting people. But actions spoke louder than words, and Tommy wasn't stupid enough to take Dream's words at face value. That wasn't the question, though. The question was if he thought the Syndicate was in the right. If Tommy said yes, he would be lying. At least, partially so. Because he didn't agree with a lot of what the Syndicate did, especially after seeing that security footage of Siren. But at the same time, if he said no, then where did that leave him? After stating over and over again that he was healing the Syndicate because it was the right thing to do, if he admitted that he thought the Syndicate was bad, did that make him bad by extension? Was he admitting that he was doing the wrong thing? It was all so complicated. It just made his head spin just trying to think about it. So instead of giving an answer, Tommy just stayed silent. He hated how it felt like he was handing a victory to Dream. We're reading it. I want to see him saved in this stream. Chapter 19. But their family. Summary. Tommy's captivity continues. Trigger warnings for this chapter. Character getting severely injured. Descriptions of pain. It wasn't long before 404 came back to the warehouse with 2 brown bags crinkling in his hands. I brought food, 404 announced, holding up the 2 bags to show to Tommy and Dream. Tommy's eyes caught on the yellow M symbol printed on the side, his mouth watering when the scent of McDonald's fries hit his nose. Did you get me my usual? Dream asked, pushing off the wall to grab the bag 404 was holding out to him. No, I decided to get you something you hated just because I felt like being a dick. 404 drawled sarcastically. Dream flipped him off and 404 ignored him as he brought the other bag towards Tommy. I didn't know what you wanted, so I got you a chicken nugget meal. Figured it was pretty neutral. Oh. They got him McDonald's too? That was surprisingly nice for kidnappers. Nuggets are fine, Tommy muttered, eyes widening when 404 dropped the bag on his lap. Dream, can I untie one of his arms so he can eat? 404 asked, digging into his pocket. Go for it. Just don't take your eyes off of him, Dream said, sliding down the wall again and taking a burger out from the bag. Yeah, like Tommy would try to escape with only one arm free while both heroes sat only a few feet away from him. He may have been impulsive, but he wasn't an idiot. Even he knew that would be a pointless attempt. Nodding, 404 pulled one of his razor-sharp throwing knives from his pocket. Tommy shrunk away at the sight of the weapon, but 404 didn't make any moves to hurt him with it. Instead, he wiggled it underneath the zip tie on Tommy's right wrist and sliced it off with one swift motion. The zip tie fell to the floor, and when Tommy lifted his arm, he gasped at the feeling of pins and needles rushing through his hand. Pocketing the knife again, 404 settled down next to Dream on the floor, reaching into the bag he had and taking out a second burger. Tommy noticed that Dream had pushed his mask up enough to show his mouth, and it was almost disconcerting to be reminded that Dream actually had a face under the mask. That he wasn't just the hero Dream, but he was a person too who ate McDonald's and bickered with his friend and seemingly hated pickles, judging by the way he kept tossing them off in his quarter-pounder. Tommy then glanced down at the bag left on his lap. Inside he could see a 10-piece box of nuggets, a medium French fry, and a water bottle. It took a few seconds of stretching his fingers to try and get feeling back into his hand, but once he did, he immediately grabbed a handful of fries and shoved them in his mouth, moaning at how good it was since it was the only thing he'd had to eat since being kidnapped were the shitty granola bars Dream had been feeding him. After he swallowed the fries, he struggled to open the water bottle with one hand, but managed it after a few seconds of struggling. Dream and 404 had been giving him plenty of water so far, so he wasn't thirsty, but it was nice to actually have some water that was ice cold. Then he grabbed the nuggets. There were 2 sauce containers at the bottom of the bag, and there was a flare of disappointment when he saw that 404 had gotten him barbecue sauce. Stupidly enough, he thought back to the night Siren got him McDonald's as a thank you for saving his life. The beginning of the entire mess that had become his life. He remembered the judgmental look Siren gave him for getting ranch with his nuggets, and how Tommy had laughed while calling him a bitch for having taste buds so inferior they couldn't appreciate the deliciousness of ranch dressing. There was an ache in his chest as the memory flashed through his mind. He missed Siren. He missed the banter, the jokes. He missed the reassuring squeezes on his shoulder, the familiar smirk set under a dark blindfold. Tommy missed the Syndicate. He missed Zephyrus' kind voice. He missed Blade's loud huffs. He missed Nemesis's warm smiles. He missed exchanging A-ups with Thanatos. He missed Daedalus' calm way of speaking. He missed Jester's loud laughter. He missed the way Rosethorn would tuck flowers into his hair when he wasn't looking. And of course he missed the others, Rambu and Tubbo, And of course he missed the others. Rambu and Tubbo, who he hadn't gotten a chance to make up with before being kidnapped. What if he never got the chance to make things right between them? Did they hate him for staying away for so long? Should he have gotten over himself and come home sooner? Did they even know he was kidnapped? Tommy was sure the Syndicate knew by now, but would they have told Nuke and Ender? There was no reason for them to. It's not like they knew Tommy had any connection to them. They probably didn't know. Maybe Tubbo had tried calling Tommy, or Rambu texted him asking him if he was okay, but he never responded since he didn't have his phone. Would they worry about him? Or would they think he was still ignoring him? Shit, did the Soots know? Tommy had been on the phone with Wilbur when Dream showed up. What the hell did he think? Dream didn't seem worried about the authorities knowing what was going on, so it seemed Wilbur hadn't called the cops. There was a very good reason why Wilbur might not call the cops if he knew Tommy had been kidnapped by Dream. But he wasn't going to think about that anymore, because he was working off guesses here. Nothing concrete. But fuck, he missed the Soots. Playing Halo in Phil's office, watching documentaries with Techno, and of course listening to Wilbur brainstorm new music. If he closed his eyes, he could almost imagine he was laying on Wilbur's bed, face shoved into blankets as he listened to Wilbur try a few new chords. Wilbur would be humming along, maybe quietly singing a few lyrics as he tried to find a tune to fit them. And Tommy would just listen, voicing his opinion here and there, but mostly just letting the soft notes wash over him. It was strange how he had the urge to go home, yet there were two homes he was thinking of. One was his home with Tubbo and Rambu, with their stained couch, ratty blankets, the smell of ramen basically ingrained into the walls. He wanted to listen to Tubbo rant and rave about why his code wasn't working without understanding a single word of it, letting Tubbo use him as a sounding board until he figured out the problem on his own. He wanted to lean against Rambu's shoulder, watching the DS in his hands as he tried to beat his record time at Mario Kart for the 100th time. His other home was with the Soots. He wasn't sure when he'd started thinking of the Soot house as home, but his chest ached with longing to go back there. He hoped they weren't worrying about him too much. The last thing he'd want to do is make them worried. Fucking hell, he just wanted to go home. Something wet dripped onto the nugget in his hand, and it took Tommy a moment to realize there were tears on his cheeks. He quickly wiped his eyes, trying to hide the fact that he'd started crying without realizing it, and started devouring his chicken nuggets to try and distract himself from his thoughts of home. Of course it wasn't his lucky day, though. He'd run out of luck long ago, apparently. Are you crying? Dream asked, sounding strangely horrified as he put his burger down. No, I'm not. Tommy snapped, keeping his head down. I'm fine. Fuck off. Shit, are you okay? Do you, not like nuggets? For some reason, Dream almost sounded panicky, like a parent who had no idea what to do when their toddler started screaming. Tommy almost laughed at that. Yes, it was definitely the nuggets that were making him cry right now. For a superhero, Dream seemed like he could be pretty damn stupid. I said I'm fine, Tommy said, shoving another nugget in his mouth. The last thing he wanted was to tell Dream he was crying because he wanted to go home. He was being pathetic. He had way bigger things to worry about than just missing home. So he decided to change the subject. What's your problem with vigilantes? Tommy asked abruptly, still keeping his eyes down as he chewed on his nugget. Dream seemed taken aback. Huh? Tommy, I can see the tears on your face. You can't just change. Let it go, Dream. He'll be fine. 404 cut in, much to Tommy's relief. If he doesn't want to talk about it, he doesn't want to talk. With his mask still pushed up, Tommy could see Dream opening his mouth as if to argue. He hesitated, though, and after a moment, he fell quiet again. Sighing, he shook his head and moved back to sit next to 404, although he didn't pick up his burger again. Are you gonna answer my question? Tommy spoke up after a moment, about vigilantes. Truth be told, after talking with Dream about the syndicate the day before, he was now curious to see how vigilantes fit into Dream's view of things. Everyone knew Dream didn't like vigilantes, but he didn't understand why he hated them so much. Dream folded his hands in his lap, pushing his mask back down as he leaned the back of his head against the wall. I mean, isn't it obvious? Vigilantes are just villains who put on a better face for the public. Tommy frowned. The fuck are you talking about? Villains are people who use their abilities to get power over others. Vigilantes do the same thing, using their abilities to assert themselves as being above normal citizens. Dream explained, stretching his arms above his head. What? That's not what vigilantes do at all, dumbass, Tommy argued. Vigilantes try to help civilians. They do what you heroes fucking won't. They stop all the petty crime without any of the glory that you rich assholes get. But don't they get glory? The people love vigilantes, Dream scoffed. Besides, if being a vigilante was really all about helping civilians, why do so many of them end up becoming villains? Like Dryad. She was a vigilante for only a few months before she became Rosethorn. She just got her recognition, waited to make some connections with villains, and then switched sides. Maybe they wouldn't switch sides if heroes didn't try to fucking hunt them down all the time, Tommy hissed, anger flaring up inside him as he remembered the way Tubbo had collapsed like a rag doll when that brick hit him in the chest. Besides, Monarch's been a vigilante for years and they haven't switched sides. Look, Monarch is an outlier. They're the only vigilante that has stayed independent for this long, but I can guarantee you they're just waiting for someone to make them an offer good enough so they can switch sides. Dream huffed. If vigilantes really wanted to help people, they'd join the hero training program. Tommy rolled his eyes. You said it yourself. The hero committee is fucking busted and it doesn't let you guys do what you want. Why would someone who actually wants to help people willingly chain themselves to that? The system isn't great, but it's better than just going off on your own, not being bound by any rules, and acting like just because you have powers you can do whatever the fuck you want. Dream told him, straightening up in his seat. Vigilantes aren't bound by anything, just like villains. There's no consequence for them if they go too far. Oh yeah? Because the heroes have such strict consequences if they fuck up? Tommy snorted. Tell me, Dream, how long were you taken off duty from when you made that building collapse? Less than a month, right? It was supposed to be 3 months suspension, but then Jester pulled his casino heist, and they needed all hands on deck, so I got called back in. Dream shot back, folding his arms over his chest. Wow, real big consequence for your actions there. Tommy huffed, his food completely forgotten about now. It's still more than what vigilantes get. Dream pushed to his feet again, 404 barely glancing up as he munched on a french fry. Like, take Nuke and Ender, for example. Nuke's powers are insanely dangerous. He's only caused minor damage with his explosions so far, but if he wanted to, he could level out a fucking city block. And right now, there's no one to stop him from doing that. Tommy stiffened at the mention of Nuke and Ender. Although his connection to the Syndicate wasn't a secret, it seemed like so far, Dream and 404 had no idea he had any sort of relation to the two vigilantes, and he'd obviously preferred to keep it that way. He kept his face as neutral as possible as Dream continued. And sure, you might argue that even if Nuke could do that, Ender wouldn't be able to cause that much damage. But his issue is that if he really wanted to help people, there's so many other ways he could do it. Do you realize how useful teleportation as a power is? Ender could be teleporting injured people to hospitals in less than a second so they don't have to wait for ambulances. Or he could help people get out of burning buildings, or even help people caught in the middle of hero and villain fights. But no, instead of using it for that, he just uses his power to keep his friend out of danger during fights. It's so fucking selfish when you think about it. Tommy's free hand curled into a fist. How dare Dream call Rambu selfish? He wasn't selfish. He was one of the most kind-hearted people Tommy had ever met. In that moment, it was taking all of his control not to go off about how wrong Dream was. I don't know why I bothered asking, Tommy huffed, stuffing another fry in his mouth. Dream fell silent after that. And Tommy didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he stewed in his anger, eating the rest of his McDonald's and trying very hard not to let himself think back to the people he missed. Once again, it wasn't long before Dream got another call, and he said he had to go. 404 stayed behind to babysit him again, making sure to put another zip tie on his wrist after he was done eating. Then, he didn't waste any time putting Tommy back to sleep, clearly not wanting to deal with Tommy's smart-ass remarks without Dream by his side. Tommy was disoriented when he woke up again. Dream was back while 404 was gone, and Dream told him it was late morning. While one part of Tommy was irritated that 404 just kept knocking him out, if there was any plus side to the whole kidnapping thing, it was that he was getting more sleep than he had in years. The morning sun was filtering through the smudged warehouse windows, dust dancing in the beams of light that crossed the floor. It was getting difficult for Tommy to keep track of how long he'd been here for. He was pretty sure this was his third day of capture, but for all he knew, 404 could have kept him sleeping for more than 24 hours. It's not like he had any way to check what the date was. 404 brought him McDonald's for him again. This time it was breakfast food, an egg McMuffin with a hash brown and more water. They repeated the same routine as yesterday, with Tommy having one free hand to eat with, and he winced at the way his wrist joints cracked when he moved his hands again. Once Tommy was done eating, Dream tied him down again and threw out the trash. Then he sauntered over to Tommy's chair, his cape swishing around his ankles with every step. "So, are you going to tell me the identities of the syndicate yet?" Dream asked. Tommy snorted. Fat chance, Fuka. It didn't matter how many moral crises the hero gave him. Tommy still wasn't going to betray the syndicate to the asshole who kidnapped him. Dream huffed. Come on, Tommy. Think about what we've been talking about. Why are you protecting them? They're not... Before Dream could continue his spiel, that he'd probably prepared beforehand, fucking loser, there was a loud pounding noise. Dream froze, his head whipping towards the door of the warehouse that Tommy couldn't see from his point of view, but had heard Dream and 404 going in and out of all the same. Tommy's heart began to beat faster. Could that be the syndicate? Had they found him? Dream whipped his head to 404, who was on his feet in a flash. Holding up one finger, Dream pointed to Tommy, and 404 nodded as he took his place next to Tommy's chair. Tommy gulped when he noticed the knife in 404's hand, and took a shaky breath as Dream walked around the corner towards the door. Tommy heard the door to the warehouse squeak open. Then, Dream spoke. Flame? What are you doing here? 404 stiffened beside him as Tommy's eyes grew wide. Flame was here? What am I doing here? Dream, I'm not an idiot. You and 404 have been acting so fucking weird over the past few days. I've barely seen you at the tower. You're not responding to my texts for hours, and now I find you hiding out in some creepy-ass warehouse? Like, dude, come on. I can tell there's something going on. Flame explained, sounding pretty damn pissed. Dream's voice was tight as he replied. We're just investigating a lead on our own, and it's not exactly in line with what the committee lets us do. You don't want to be involved in this. Wait. Flame didn't know that Tommy was kidnapped. Dream had been actively trying to hide it from Flame over their phone calls. The only reason Dream would be doing that would be if he knew Flame wouldn't be happy with what they were doing. What do you mean it's not in line with what the committee lets us do? Flame asked. Before Dream could respond, Tommy opened his mouth. Help! He screamed as loud as he could. Help me! I'm in here! Tommy was cut off by 404's hand slapping over his mouth. Still, he was a second too late. Tommy's voice had been heard. What the fuck was that? Flame demanded, and Tommy heard pounding footsteps echo through the warehouse. Flame, seriously, you don't want— No! Dream, you don't get to fucking hide shit from me. Not when it sounds like you have a goddamn— Flame rounded the corner. He looked almost exactly like he did on TV. Long dark hair pushed back with a white bandana, a flame-patterned mask covering the lower half of his face, black wrappings around his hands leading up to his mid-elbow. The only thing Tommy would say was different about Flame than how he looked in interviews and on the news was that he seemed younger? Like, although Tommy could only see his eyes, something told him this guy had to be in his early 20s at most. Right now, though, those onyx black eyes were staring at Tommy with pure and utter shock. Dream rounded the corner behind Flame, shaking his head as he folded his arms over his chest. I told you didn't want to know, Dream muttered. Flame blinked a few times, as if he was trying to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Tommy squirmed against his restraints again, trying to yell past the hand muffling his voice. What the— Who the hell is this? Flame shouted, after his moment of shock passed, whipping his head towards Dream. You kidnapped a fucking kid? Look, Flame, he's not just some kid, Dream said, dropping his arms to hold his hands up in a placating motion. He works for the Syndicate. 404 chimed in, grunting as Tommy struggled against his grip. Flame's head turned back towards Tommy, and he could see now that there were flames dancing in his dark eyes. No, he doesn't! This kid is like 15! Well, he wasn't fucking 15, but he wasn't exactly in a position to correct that right now. He does, Dream insisted. You know how villains have been coming back from injuries that should have either killed them or taken them out for months? Like when I told you I fought Siren a few months back? Hell, like Nemesis? Flame winced at the mention of Nemesis's name, but quickly schooled his expression. What does that have to do with anything? Dream gestured towards Tommy. He has healing powers. The kid runs a healing business for the Syndicate in the back room of the coffee shop he works at. That doesn't make it okay for you to fucking kidnap him, though! Flame shouted, waving his hands around wildly. Why the hell didn't you just get a warrant to arrest him? I didn't have enough physical evidence, Dream admitted, but there's an alley that connects to the back of the cafe. I hid around the corner and watched villains go in with bleeding injuries, only to come out minutes later completely healed. It doesn't matter if you knew he was healing villains. Why the hell did you kidnap a teenager? Flame demanded, and Tommy noticed literal flames now starting to dance on his fingertips. For fuck's sake, he knows the identities of the Syndicate! Dream yelled, his booming voice echoing around the warehouse. At this, Flame paused. The flames on his hands died down as he gave Tommy a long look, before turning his eyes back to Dream. Silence hung in the air, thick and choking the room like smoke. Tommy could hear his own ragged breaths against 404's hand, the hot air puffing back against his mouth. Tommy watched as Flame dug into his pocket, meeting Dream's mask with an eerily calm expression as he pulled out his phone. His breath caught in his throat. Was he going to call someone? Was Tommy finally going to get out? A shiver ran down Tommy's spine when instead of getting upset at the gesture, Dream laughed. What are you gonna do? Call the hero committee? You know they're just gonna make me let him go and pay the kid off so he doesn't tell anyone, Dream said, and Tommy could hear his cocky smirk. No, I know reporting this to the committee would be useless, Flame responded, tapping a few buttons on his phone. Then he pointed the phone in Tommy's direction. But I could take a picture right now and send it to every news station in the city. It was as if an icy breeze had blown through the entire warehouse as soon as Flame uttered those words. 404 was frozen, his hand still holding Tommy to the chair, keeping him from speaking. Tommy's hands and legs were zip-tied, and 404's signature goggles were sitting right over his eyes like they always did. There was no way this picture didn't look incriminating as hell. Flame, I know you're upset we didn't tell you, but let's be honest. You won't do this, Dream said, sounding completely calm. Flame narrowed his eyes. Yes, I absolutely will. You've gone way too fucking far this time. You included 404. 404 grumbled but didn't respond. I'm doing what's necessary to take down the syndicate once and for all, Dream explained. We've reached a standstill with them. They keep doing more and more damage to the city, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. The only way is if we know their identities, and this kid has the information we need. Dream, you have a problem. Don't you see that? Flame hissed, snapping his head towards the other hero. You're so focused on trying to take down the syndicate that it's like you've completely forgotten why you became a hero in the first place. Our job is to protect citizens, not kidnap them for information. He's not a citizen, though, Dream argued. Sure, he might not technically be a villain, but he's not a citizen anymore. He's just as caught up in this as the rest of us are. It doesn't matter. What you're doing is insane, Flame exclaimed, stomping his foot on the ground. I don't care what your reasoning is. This is wrong. Of course I know it's wrong. I'm not fucking proud of what I've done here, but I didn't have any other choice. Don't you get that? You keep telling yourself you don't have any other choice, but that's just an excuse and you know it, Dream, Flame said, clenching his jaw. I'm going to take a picture of this and send it straight to the news, unless you let the kid go right now. There was another heavy silence. Even though Tommy couldn't see either of their eyes, he had a feeling that 404 and Dream were having a conversation just through their looks at one another right now. In contrast, Flame kept his eyes locked on Tommy, the camera on his phone still pointing right at Tommy's face. After a few agonizing beats, Dream took a breath. No. The hush that followed was so silent you could hear a pin drop. No? I said I'm not letting him go, Flame, Dream told him, stepping in front of the camera. Because I know you, and I can tell that you're bluffing. You wouldn't actually send this to the media because you know what would happen to both me and 404 if you did. We'd go to jail, probably for at least a few decades. I know you better than anyone, and I know you couldn't do that to us. More silence as Flame glared at Dream. Tommy's heart was pounding in his ears as he tried to meet Flame's eyes. Tried to beg him through looks alone to please, for the love of God, let him out of this situation. The seconds ticked on like hours. 1, 2, 3. Then, fuck you, Dream, Flame muttered. Oh wait, fuck you, Dream, Flame muttered, shoulders sagging as he pocketed his phone again. No, that couldn't... He was just giving up? Just like that? You can take the hand off his mouth, 404, Dream said. Ugh, finally, Dream muttered, taking his hand off of Tommy's mouth and wiping it against his pants. He walked away from Tommy's chair, heading back over to the stand by Dream's side while Flame stayed frozen in place, staring at Tommy with an unreadable expression. Flame, Tommy stared, meeting the man's eyes. Why aren't you doing anything? Flame winced at the sound of Tommy's voice, his hands curling into fists at his sides. With his head down, he walked over to Tommy's chair, crouching down in front of it so he wasn't standing above Tommy. I'm sorry, Flame said quietly. I want to help you. I really do. And why don't you? Tommy asked, his voice cracking. You could get me out of here right now. I don't even know the identities of anyone in the syndicate. I swear. They never told me just in case something like this happened. Flame winced again. I know, but I can't turn them in like that, he admitted, looking away as if he was ashamed to meet Tommy's eyes. They're my family. Even though I know this is wrong, I can't lose them. You get that, right? Tommy wanted to say he didn't understand that he would stand up for what was right even if it meant losing the people he loved. Maybe he could. Maybe if he actually found himself in that situation, he would be able to push past his own wants and do what was right. But he knew it was more likely he wouldn't do that. Although he didn't want to admit that to himself. So he stayed silent, and Flame took that as an answer in itself. I'll do my best to make sure things are okay for you, Flame told him. I won't let them hurt you. There was a loud huff from behind Flame. You really think we'd hurt a kid? Dream asked, sounding offended at the suggestion. Normally I'd say no, but I also didn't think you'd kidnap a kid, so I really don't fucking know anymore, Flame snapped, shooting a dirty look at Dream over his shoulder. Come on, I'm not that much of a dick, Dream argued, seeming genuinely offended at the idea that he'd hit Tommy. Considering you kidnapped me, I'd say you kinda are, Tommy decided to chime in. Oh, come on, Tommy, we got you McDonald's, Dream then pointed out, walking back over to the wall and sliding to the ground. Wow, you got me nuggets and an egg McMuffin. I can forgive you for literally tying me to a chair now, Tommy mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Suddenly, Flame cut in again. Your name is Tommy? He asked. Oh yeah. Flame didn't know shit about this, so he had no idea who Tommy was. Yeah, that's me, Tommy answered. Also, I'm not 15, dickhead. I'm 17. Flame snorted and held his hands up in mock surrender. My bad. I was just trying to say you look young. Tommy scowled, but Flame seemed to be able to tell there wasn't much heat behind it. At this point, Tommy didn't have the energy to actually get worked up over being called young. It was such a silly thing compared to his current situation. Sure, it was a nice thing to focus his anger on to pretend he wasn't literally in captivity, but it only worked for a few seconds. No, Tommy was fucked. Flame had been his only hope at possibly getting out of here, and he wasn't going to do a damn thing to help him. He could only hope now that the Syndicate somehow managed to find him. But it had been days. How had they not found him yet? They had so many resources at their disposal. If they hadn't found him yet, how were they ever going to find him? How long was Dream even going to keep him here? Tommy genuinely didn't know the identities of the Syndicate, but it seemed like he wasn't going to believe that. How long would he have to wait before Dream got tired of holding him captive? He had to let him go at some point. It's not like Dream could just keep him here forever, right? Tommy didn't know that, and that terrified him. The rest of the day was strangely quiet. Flame refused to leave, instead sitting on the floor near Tommy's chair, sometimes trying to chat with him about random stuff. Do you like video games? I like Animal Crossing. I meant games that were cool. Bitch, I'll have you know Animal Crossing is extremely cool. But mostly just staying quiet. At one point he laid down on the hard concrete floor, and Tommy was 90% sure he had actually fallen asleep. Dream seemed reluctant to continue his usual questioning with Flame here now. Instead of going back to the back and forth they'd been having the past few days, Dream instead was just quiet. He was slumped against the wall, occasionally looking at Flame and running his hands over his mask, in the same way someone would drag their hands down their face. 404 was definitely the least affected out of the three of them. He'd fallen asleep pretty quickly after Flame had settled in, and woke up when the sun was setting, only to pull out his phone and scroll through Twitter for another hour. Eventually, 404 left to go get food again. It seemed like he was the only one that could make the food runs, given that Flame wasn't going to leave Tommy alone with either Dream or 404. And Dream definitely wasn't going to leave Flame alone with Tommy. The silence between Flame and Dream was stony at best, downright suffocating at worst. Even if Flame refused to turn Dream in, it was clear he was very pissed at Dream, shutting down any of Dream's attempts to talk with either a sharp comment or just outright ignoring him. It kind of felt like Tommy was the kid in the middle of the divorce argument. Despite how annoying 404 was, he found himself desperately wishing for him to come back so Tommy could fucking breathe again. Thankfully, 404 came back about an hour after he left with a huge takeout bag on his arm. It wasn't McDonald's this time, and the smell of something fried and delicious made Tommy's stomach growl. "Oh, thank fucking God," Flame muttered, pushing to his feet as he ran for the takeout bag. "What'd you get?" "That fried chicken food truck we went to that one time," 404 said, as he dug into the bag, pulling out a sandwich wrapped in paper. "Tommy, you're fine with fried chicken, right?" Tommy clenched his jaw. Again, another reminder. Hopefully he didn't cry over his food again. "Yeah, I'm fine with it," he replied, relieved when his voice didn't crack. Drink break. And I also find that these Listerine patches kind of help with sore throats after reading for a while. So I'm gonna have one. "404 walked over, taking his knife out of his pocket and cutting off the zip tie on his wrist once again. Flame glanced over, frowning when he noticed Tommy using his one hand to start eating the sandwich. "Dude, come on, let him use both hands to eat." "No way," Dream cut in, having already pushed his mask up to start eating his sandwich. "I'm not risking him escaping that easily." "What the hell is he gonna do? There's no way for him to get the zip ties off his ankles with just his hands." Tommy decided to ignore their arguing, not really caring whether or not Dream decided to untie his other wrist. While it would be nice, he could eat the sandwich well enough with just one, as he was already doing. The sandwich was just as good as it was the first time. Fundy's fried chicken was the perfect balance of crispy and juicy, and Tommy wished so badly he could be eating this with Wilbur right now. He glanced up at the moonlight streaming through the windows. It was a full moon tonight, and it lit everything up in the warehouse with a soft white glow. Even through the dust on the glass, Tommy could make out stars twinkling against the black. It was strange how some of the stars weren't white, though, and instead seemed to be a dark shade of glittering purple. Wait. Those weren't stars. Furrowing his brows, Tommy strained to try and focus more on the odd purple particles that seemed to be floating right outside the window. He'd seen those before, he knew that. He just couldn't remember where. Suddenly, the sound of the warehouse door being kicked down helped Tommy remember where he'd seen those purple particles before. Ender left those behind when he teleported, meaning Rambu had just been here. Meaning Rambu was probably outside, along with Tubbo and probably even the rest of the syndicate. Tommy smiled as Dream and Flame's argument abruptly cut off. As the sound of storing footsteps began to echo around the warehouse, the three heroes jumped into action. "Where is he?" A gruff voice boomed. It was, "Where is he?" A gruff voice boomed. Blade. It was Blade. Holy shit. The syndicate was here. Tommy wanted to cry. They came for him. Before he could celebrate, though, the Dream Team jumped into action. Flame's arms lit up in swirling shades of orange and red, while 404's throwing knives glinted in the moonlight. Both of them sprinted around the corner, and suddenly there was loud shouting as the fight began. Dream, meanwhile, stayed where he was. He tossed his sandwich to the side, pushing down his mask and turning to face Tommy. I don't want to hurt you, so don't make this hard on me, Dream said quietly, his voice barely audible over the loud yelling and the clanging of metal on metal coming from the part of the warehouse Tommy couldn't see. And before Tommy could ask him what he meant by that, he felt a strange pushing underneath of him. Looking down on the ground, Tommy yelped when he saw that Dream was using his power to lift Tommy's chair into the air, with Tommy still sitting on it. What the— Dream, put me down! Tommy shouted, struggling against the 3 zip ties still holding him down. He kept moving up, 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 until he was almost hitting his head against the ceiling of the warehouse, which was really fucking high. It was making him dizzy to even try and look down at Dream. The sound of footsteps got louder, and Tommy's breath caught in his throat as several figures rounded the corner. There was Blade at the front, his pink hair tumbling loose around his shoulders as he huffed like a true wild boar. Zephyr swooped down beside him, his wings somehow looking even darker than usual. Daedalus stood beside them as well, his mechanical arms holding a deadly-looking trident. Then Tommy spotted Nuke and Ender, and even with their masks on, Tommy could tell they were looking at him with terror written across their faces. While Tommy was pretty glad to see them here, he had to wonder when the hell those two started working with the Syndicate. And then Siren ran in behind the others, freezing in place when he saw Tommy floating near the ceiling, fighting desperately against his restraint. Judging by the shouts he heard coming from the part of the warehouse he couldn't see, Jester, Rosethorn, Nemesis, and Thanatos were battling it out with 404 and Flame. Holy shit. The entire Syndicate came here for him. If you come any closer, I'll drop him, Dream threatened, snapping Tommy's attention back to him. Siren opened his mouth, but Dream immediately pressed a button on the side of his mask. Siren, either you keep your mouth shut, or we're going to have a really hard time with negotiations since I won't be listening to a word you say, Dream said, and Tommy realized he must have some kind of deafening feature in his mask. Zephyrus placed a hand on Siren's shoulder, silently shaking his head no. Siren grit his teeth, and Tommy could feel his eyes boring into him through his mask. But he shut his mouth, and Dream pressed the side of his mask again. Good. Now, where were we? Dream asked, cocking his head to the side. How about you give Tommy back to us and we won't paint the walls with your blood? Blade growled, tightening his grip on his sword. While that's a tempting offer, I think you might have to do better than that, Dream hummed, tapping his chin with the hand not holding Tommy up. Dream, you're outnumbered pretty badly here. If you hand him over to us without issue, we'll do you one mercy and not kill you right now, Zephyrus warned, his voice ice, like ice compared to the fire in Blade's. Oh, you think you're outnumbered? Dream laughed, and it was harsh and grating, and it was that harsh and grating laugh that he hated. Suddenly, Dream whipped his free hand over, and Nuke shrieked as he went flying. His body slammed against the wall to his left, and he was pinned there by Dream's invisible force. Nuke! Ender screamed, teleporting to his side. He tried to pull Nuke off the wall, but Nuke was grasping as he tried to struggle against the telekinesis, and neither of them were strong enough to push against it. Let him go, you bastard! Tommy screamed, still fighting desperately with the zip ties. His wrist was starting to bleed now from where the zip tie was cutting into his skin, but he didn't care. Tubbo was getting hurt. He had to try and do something to stop Dream. Dream. Daedalus's calm voice suddenly broke over the chaos. You know this isn't going to end well for you. You're not able to take all of us. Dream whipped his head in Daedalus's direction so fast, Tommy thought his neck might break. "Oh, really, Warden? You really think I can't take all of you?" He laughed again, and it made Tommy's blood run cold. "I am not going to give up until I get what I want, and that's the identities of everyone in the goddamn syndicate." Then Nuke fell to the ground, and he gasped as he struggled to sit up. Now with his second hand free again, 3 swords rose out of the sheaths on Dream's back, floating around his head ready to strike. Dream kept glancing between Blade, Zephyrus, Daedalus, and Siren. He was waiting for one of them to strike first, which is why he didn't see Ender until it was too late. In one moment, Ender was kneeling next to Nuke. The next, he was right in front of Dream, sprinting at him with a battle axe in hand that he had definitely got from Blade, leaving behind a flurry of purple particles in his wake. One of Dream's swords rose up to easily block the heavy swing Ender made with the axe, but as soon as the sword blocked it, Ender disappeared again, the axe clattering to the ground as Ender reappeared on Dream's other side. Tommy watched as he body-slammed Dream's side, and then everything went in bullet time. Dream began to fall backwards with Ender on top of him. The hand Dream had been using the whole time to keep Tommy up flew to the side, moving backwards as Dream struggled to catch himself. Dream felt the chair he was in suddenly jerk backwards with violent force. Tommy was moving very fast towards the wall behind him. Far too fast. "Shit! Tommy!" Dream yelled, trying to reach up towards Tommy again. But it was too late. The chair, with Tommy still tied to it, slammed into the wall with the kind of force Tommy imagined you'd feel in a car crash. He heard loud cracks as the wooden chair splintered underneath him. Then, he was falling. The concrete floor rushed up to greet him with open arms, and when Tommy hit, there was a deafening crunch as his bones met the floor with more impact than what was probably healthy. For a moment, he was numb. His head was spinning, and all he heard was a loud ringing in his ears. Then the pain hit. Yeah, definitely wasn't healthy to fall that far. It was a hot flood of burning pain that washed over him all at once. Sharp stabs were shooting through his head. Fire was licking his veins, and every breath felt like needles were jabbing into his lungs. The ringing in his ears began to fade, just enough for him to hear a voice. "Tommy!" Siren screamed, his trenchcoat flaring out as he sprinted towards Tommy. And suddenly, Siren was there. He was kneeling at Tommy's hot side, hands hovering over his arms. And then Tommy realized his head was sitting on something wet. "Oh my god, fuck, Tommy, I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." He was cut off by a shriek coming from behind, and Tommy tried to move his head to see what it was, but it sent another wave of pain through his skull, and he screamed. "Fuck, don't try to move, Toms. You'll only make it worse," Siren said, his voice cracking as he struggled to keep calm. It's just the others fighting Dream. They're taking care of him." Shit, yeah, Dream. They were fighting him now, weren't they? God, he wanted to see what was happening so badly, but the pain was only getting worse by the second, and it was making his vision spin. A whine rose up out of Tommy's throat as a bright light began to shine from his chest. His healing. His body was probably trying to heal itself. There was a loud pop in his ears when he felt a rib shift back into place, and he cried out again at how badly it hurt. Then, more purple particles flooded his already swirling vision as Ender appeared next to Siren. "Holy, this is bad. This is so bad," Ender stammered. "Ender, I need you to teleport us out of here," Siren ordered, grabbing Ender's arm. "It doesn't have to be far. Get us to a nearby roof or something. Ender gulped. Okay, but I don't know if I should try to teleport him while he's... It's better than staying here and risking him getting hurt more!" Siren snapped, making Ender jump. Another rib snapped back together, and Tommy screamed again. The orange glow was getting brighter, making his shirt entirely see-through as he writhed on the floor. Then, there was a hand grabbing his wrist, and Tommy whimpered at the touch. "I'm sorry, Tommy. It'll be fast, Ender whispered. Then another voice shouted behind them. Shit! 404! Grab Ender before he teleports them out! Dream yelled, sounding much more winded than before. There were footsteps getting louder, and Ender shut his eyes. Tommy's eyes widened as 404 appeared behind Ender, reaching for his head to put him to sleep, but right before he could touch his hair, everything disappeared. There was the darkness and the stomach-swooping sensation again. Tommy screamed at the vacuum that pulled over his body, jostling all his broken bones and sending more and more pain through him. And then suddenly, the world was back. Cold air stung his cheeks as he landed against another hard surface, and although his vision was still spinning, he could just make out the stars. Are you okay? Siren asked, his face blurring into swirls of deep blue-black fabric and soft brown hair. Tommy could only whimper as the glowing in his chest grew brighter. His shoulder wrenched back into its socket and he shouted again, the tears streaming down his cheeks, hot against his skin. What do you think we should do? Ender asked, still holding on to Tommy's wrist with so little pressure it was like a feather. You need to go back to the warehouse and help them out, Siren told him. It's gonna be fucking useless in there compared to the rest of you. I can stay with him and get him home, but you need to make sure Dream doesn't come after us. Ender frowned. But, Rambu, I swear to you on my life, I'm not going to let him get hurt again, Siren whispered. And Tommy jolted hearing Siren use Rambu's name. I made that mistake once. I'm never making it again. There was a beat of silence, and Tommy could see the orange light from his chest shining against Rambu's black hair. Okay, he finally relented. Tommy, Tubbo and I will be back soon. Tommy would have nodded if he could, but it was getting so hard to even comprehend what people were telling him. By the time he processed what Rambu said, he had already disappeared again, leaving him with Siren. Siren gently rested a hand on the shoulder that had just popped back into its socket a few minutes earlier, and Tommy was relieved when it didn't worsen the pain. Can you hear me, Toms? Barely. His head felt like it was full of cotton, and as the pain gradually began to dissipate as his healing pushed itself to the limit, his body was getting heavier than he'd ever felt it before. Kinda, Tommy muttered, his words slurring. You're gonna be alright, Siren told him. It's okay now. You're safe. You did so good. Tommy whimpered as another bone snapped together, and suddenly there was a hand in his hair. Siren took care to avoid the blood spot on the back of his head, although Tommy was pretty sure it had mostly healed itself by now. Instead, he carted his fingers through the curls on the top of his head, and the touch was so soft, so reassuring, that he melted into it. He tried to use the little energy he had to put all his focus onto how nice it felt, instead of the lingering pain that was still echoing through his limbs. It was so familiar, having these fingers run through his hair. It reminded him so much of the times Wilbur would do this when they would watch movies together, or when Tommy wasn't feeling good after having to heal people. The same calloused fingertips worn down from years of guitar playing were the only thing keeping him from focusing on the cracking sounds of his own ribs forcibly slotting themselves back into his rib cage. He was so tired, both physically and mentally. He was tired of pretending. He was tired of lying to himself. He was too tired to stop himself from finally giving voice to the thoughts he'd shoved into the back of his mind for so long. It hurts, Wilbur, he whispered, leaning further into Siren's hand. It hurts so much. The fingers stilled for just a moment, and Tommy whined at the loss. Then, after a few beats, the fingers went back to tracing small circles in his scalp. When Siren spoke again, the metal tinge that was always there because of his voice changer was gone. I know it hurts, but you'll be okay, Siren reassured him in Wilbur's voice. You just gotta hold out, Toms. Just a little longer. Tommy forced his eyes open again, his lashes sticking together because of his tears. When he glanced up, his vision wasn't spinning anymore. Wilbur had pushed the mask up, so Tommy could finally see Siren's eyes. He'd been right. Of course he wasn't surprised, but there was an ache in his chest as he met Wilbur's dark gaze while he still wore Siren's clothes. Tommy knew that this was a big deal. This had a lot of implications, and he probably should be pretty damn pissed at Wilbur right now. But he was so unbelievably tired. Every thought came to him slowly, as if his mind had been filled with honey when he wasn't looking. The orange glow had finally faded and taken the pain with it, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion that he'd never felt before. Tommy was too tired to care about being mad at Wilbur right now. He was just so relieved to see his brother again. "I missed you," he whispered, his voice a little more than a rough wisp of sound. Tears made their way down Wilbur's cheeks. "I missed you too," he whispered back, his voice cracking. "Can I sleep now?" Tommy then asked, already letting his eyes flutter shut. Yeah, you can sleep now," Wilbur nodded, giving him a small smile. "I'll be here when you wake up, but..." Sleep grabbed onto Tommy like an ocean pulling him under its depths. Tommy sunk into the void so quickly he didn't hear the last part of Wilbur's sentence. "Only if you want me to be." We're reading another chapter. Oh my god. Oh my god. Sorry. Oh my lord. Oh my lord. Okay. Wait a second. I just need to stretch. Oh, wait. Hold on. I need a moment. I've been staring at a screen for so long. Oh my god. I guess it's like, this doesn't happen with anything else. But when I'm like reading for a long amount of time, and I'm like so invested in a story, I just get so fucking like I just get so like entrapped in it. Like it's like pulling me in. I barely even know where I am. God, this is why I miss reading, like actually reading. Because it like reading books, especially like fantasy ones and stuff, brought me to another world, and it felt like I was actually there. I figured about halfway into the chapter when it said like it clicked about halfway in the chapter when it said that the like because that when it said the trigger warnings was like mentions of pain and like severe injuries. At first I thought it was gonna be because Dream was like torturing Tommy, but I should have known from like the author's note in the previous chapter that wouldn't happen. But I figured I realized like halfway through that it was probably gonna be when like the Syndicate found Tommy. I just thought it would be somebody else getting hurt, not him. But hey, I guess it's good that he was the one that, I mean, he could have healed anyone regardless, but like it's kind of good that he was the one that got hurt so he could heal himself without having to find the person that was, you know. Let's see. Chapter 20. A small piece of home. Summary. Tommy is recovering. Trigger warnings for this chapter. Mentions of reality confusion, not being sure if things are real. Minor panic attack early on. The first thing Tommy noticed when he woke up was that he was thirsty as fuck. Maybe I could tell it's at the end of the video. I'm gonna bring it back to the beginning. Okay, that should be good. Oh, also his head was killing him, and his body was pretty sore too. Honestly, he was just kind of having a shit time all around. His thoughts were fuzzy as he struggled to remember why exactly he felt so shitty. He knew there was a reason. Something had happened. Something big. But he was still half asleep, and trying to grasp onto blurred moments was like grabbing at wisps of smoke that were blowing just out of his reach. Tommy tried to focus on figuring out where he was first and foremost, because that seemed like a good place to start getting his bearings. He was laying in a bed. He could tell that much. The mattress was plush and cradled his sore limbs in all the right places. His head was also on an unbelievably squishy pillow, and he could feel his cheek being smushed into a soft pillowcase. It was odd. He wasn't used to sleeping in a bed after... Wait. All at once, everything came flooding back. The kidnapping, talking to Dream, Flame not helping him, the Syndicate showing up to save him. The memory of hearing his own bones break echoed in his ears, and although the memories were addled by pain, he unfortunately could recall the entire past few minutes he'd been conscious with perfect clarity. Ender teleporting him out, Siren crouching down next to him, apologizing over and over and running his hands through Tommy's hair. Seeing Wilbur's eyes staring out at him from under Siren's mask. Tommy finally giving in and letting the puzzle pieces slot into his place of mind. Siren was Wilbur. The confirmation felt like someone knocking the wind out of him. Of course, a part of him had already known. Hell, looking back, it was painfully obvious in retrospect. Wilbur had even joked about meeting Siren over fried chicken sandwiches, back when Tommy was still unsure if he could even call Wilbur a friend. So much had happened since then. Wilbur had lied to him over and over again, acting like he didn't know Tommy had healing powers when he healed him in the soot kitchen the first time he came over, politely not questioning all the times Tommy came back late from a shift at the cafe, asking Tommy what he thought of Wilbur after healing him as Siren. Oh fuck. He had just been sitting there basking as Tommy praised Wilbur to high heavens. Anger stirred in Tommy's gut. He took advantage of his secret identity and used it to find out what Tommy thought of him in his civilian form. That was just... It was fucking embarrassing for him. But could he really be mad at Wilbur for that? If Tommy was in the same position, given the opportunity to find out what Wilbur thought of him while hidden behind a mask, could he really say he wouldn't do the same? Tommy wasn't sure. There was so much to think about, and his head was throbbing far too much to make any sense of his conflicted thoughts right now. So instead, he decided to put off that crisis and instead traded it for another. He opened his eyes. Despite his conflicted feelings towards the Soots right now, Tommy couldn't help the wave of relief that washed through him when he realized he was back in his bedroom at the Soots. But just as quickly as that relief came, it was replaced with bone-chilling fear. Was he really back at the Soots? Or was this another 404 dream? He had already been tricked into thinking he was home before because of the hero. What if all of that, Flame wanting to save him, the Syndicate breaking in, Ender teleporting him and Siren out? What if that was a dream? Tommy bolted upright, ignoring the twin gasps from two figures sitting next to his bed. He didn't even look at who it was, instead lunging for the window behind his nightstand, pressing his hand against the glass and peering outside. The glass was cool, but not too cool. There was no fog blocking the view of the outside. He just saw the Soot's backyard, the same as it always was. But what if there was something else? What if 404 had learned his lesson with the windows and instead found another way to hide that this was a dream? Could he really trust anything he was seeing? Tommy? A voice asked behind him, breaking him out of his thoughts. What are you doing? Tommy froze. He hadn't heard that voice in his dreams before. Whipping his head around, Tommy felt something seize in his chest when he saw Tubbo and Rambu sitting next to the edge of his bed, both staring at him with identical expressions of worry. Neither of them appeared in the dreams with 404. If they were here, maybe that meant this was real. Tubbo? Rambu? His breathing hitched. Is this real right now? Fuck, what if this was still a dream? His breathing picked up as his eyes darted around the room, trying to find a tell that this wasn't real. His heart pounded in his ears as he tried to find something, anything, that could prove to him that this was 100% reality. What do you mean? Of course this is real, Rambu said, giving Tommy a worried frown. Tommy shook his head, curling his hands in and out of fists. I need you guys to prove it to me. Prove that 404 isn't... that he's not fucking with my head again. Tubbo and Rambu shared a look. Suddenly, both of them lunged forward, and Tommy felt a sharp pinch on his arm, followed immediately by a stinging slap against his cheek. The pain startled him out of his panic. What the fuck was that for? What the fuck was that for? Tommy yelped, cradling his bright red cheek with his hand. Tubbo, why did you slap him? Rambu asked, staring at Tubbo with wide eyes. I thought we were just supposed to pinch him at the same time. Tubbo put his hands up in mock surrender. I just thought a slap would be more effective. Tommy gave him a flat stare, and Tubbo at least had the decency to look sheepish. I mean, at least you know you're awake now, right? Well, he had a point. If this had been one of 404's dreams, Tommy was pretty sure getting pinched and slapped at the same time would have caused something weird to happen. So far, everything seemed completely normal. His hands were still trembling as he took a shaky breath, twisting his fingers into the soft blanket covering his legs. This was reality. It had to be. Then, there was a hand tugging his own away from the blankets, and he glanced up to see Rambu squeezing his fingers. You're awake, Tommy. I teleported you out of there with Siren, remember? Tommy nodded. He remembered. Good. This is real, I promise. Rambu reassured him, his hand around Tommy's giving him something to focus on. Rambu's hand felt perfectly real. There was even the ridge of a scar on his ring fingertip pressing into Tommy's hand, which Tommy knew the boy had gotten when he was trying to cut dry ramen noodles in half with a knife because Tubbo wanted to be able to eat the dry noodles on the go as a convenient snack. Wait 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Tommy breathed, the tension in his shoulders seeping out. I believe you. This was reality. He had actually been saved. He was finally home. Fucking hell, Tommy muttered after a few moments of silence, a pounding headache slamming into him with the force of a truck. Breaking all your bones really does make you feel like shit. I'll say, you were passed out for like a day and a half, Tubbo told him. Tommy froze. A day and a half? Tubbo nodded, and Tommy dragged a hand down his face. Jesus Christ! What the hell even happened after I passed out? What he wanted to ask was, what happened to Dream? Did the Syndicate pin him down? Did the Syndicate kill him? As strange as it might seem, Tommy really hoped the latter wasn't true. Despite the fact that Dream literally kidnapped him, the idea of the Syndicate killing the man put a bad taste in his mouth. Dream hadn't meant to hurt him, and despite Tommy trying to get a rise out of him, he'd never been cruel to Tommy during his captivity. Sure, he was an annoying bastard with a superiority complex, but it didn't seem like he was a genuinely bad person. More like someone pushed to the edge of desperation, just trying to do what he thought was necessary. He didn't deserve to die. Oh shoot, I'm like out of water. I'll be right back. Oh! Ah! My headphones got caught on my necklace. No! Where? There it is. Be right back, chat. God, I love this story. Okay. Well, Rambu began, his eyes falling to his lap. After I teleported you and Siren out of there, I went back to the fight and we were all trying to pin Dream down. But I guess since you were gone and he knew he wasn't going to be able to find you again, he decided to just get out of there. The fucker basically sent out like a giant shockwave to knock us all down, Tubbo chimed in. We all fell to our asses, and Dream launched himself, flame and 404 out the nearest window. By the time we all got to our feet, he was long gone. So he escaped? Tommy asked, raising an eyebrow. Both of them nodded, and something loosened in Tommy's chest. Sure, it wasn't great to know that Dream was still out there running free and could very well kidnap him again if he wanted. But it was better than him being dead. I'm sorry, Tommy, Rambu said, his voice strained. Tommy shrugged. Not your fault. You guys tried your best. And honestly, I think it might be better this way. God knows what the Syndicate would have done to him if you guys managed to catch him. Rambu winced. I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't have been pretty, but I'm also just so incredibly sorry for letting you get hurt. Tommy frowned. What do you mean? It's not your fault Dream decided to make me float in the air like some fucking ghost movie. But it's my fault he threw you, Rambu argued, gnawing on his lip. If I hadn't knocked into him, he wouldn't have chucked you into that wall and you wouldn't have gotten hurt. Jesus Christ, Rambu really did blame himself for everything, didn't he? Rambu, are you fucking kidding? What you did was totally awesome, he exclaimed. You were so badass out there. You literally charged at Dream and faked him out. No one else would have been able to pull that. Rambu blinked. But you got thrown into the wall because of that. I should have been more careful. Tommy rolled his eyes. There's no way he could have known that would happen. Plus, there was probably no way of ending that standoff without me breaking at least a few bones. Still, nope. Ranbu, you're done with... No, nope, Ranbu, you're done with the self-blame. Tubbo cut in, slapping a hand over Ranbu's mouth. Remember, we've been working on this. Ranbu sighed deeply, but didn't bother trying to fight the hand over his mouth. Tommy would have laughed at the utter defeat on his face if the context were any different. So, you guys really worked with the syndicate to save me? Tommy asked after a few moments of silence, realizing he still had no idea how that came about. Yep, we sure did. Tubbo nodded. By the way, we should probably tell you this before one of us slips up and freak out, but we know Wilbur, Techno, and Phil are Siren, Blade, and Zephyrus. Wait, what? Tommy blinked. They knew? How the hell did Tubbo and Ranbu know Siren was Wilbur? Did he tell them? But why wouldn't he have told... Before he could finish that thought, the second part of Tubbo's sentence slammed into Tommy's mind like a train. The fuck do you mean Blade and Zephyrus are Techno and Phil? Tommy gasped, staring wide-eyed at his friends. Like, I figured out that Wilbur was Siren, but... And then, the rest of his sleep-addled mind put the rest of the pieces into place. Siren, Zephyrus, and Blade had always acted like a family. Tommy had suspected the three of them were family ever since the time he had healed Zephyrus up when he had teased Blade about his antics as a teenager. If Wilbur was Siren, then of course Blade was Techno and Zephyrus was Phil. Groaning, Tommy dragged his hands down his face. Do I know any fucking civilians? He grumbled into his fingers. How did you guys even find out their identities anyway? We just figured it out, Ranbu shrugged. But, we should probably also mention that they know we're Nuke and Ender. Tommy's head whipped up at that. What? Suddenly his eyes widened. Wait, I didn't tell them if that's what you're thinking. I swear on my life, I hadn't told anyone about you two. Tommy, it's okay. We know. Tubbo cut him off. Wilbur just figured us out like we figured him out. We know it wasn't you. Oh, thank God. Tommy really didn't want his friends to think he'd betray them like that. Shoulders slumping, Tommy ran a hand through his hair, wincing when his fingers snagged on blood-matted curls. Can you guys just please explain how the fuck this all happened? You guys working with the syndicate and finding out each other's identities and just being okay with it all? Tubbo and Ranbu shared a look, as if they were silently debating which one of them had to take the job of explaining everything. After a few beats of their stare down, Ranbu sighed and glanced back at Tommy, and began to explain. Ranbu told him how they'd found Siren, Blade, and Zephyrus standing in front of the cafe, Siren clutching onto his broken phone in his backpack discarded on the ground. He went over Siren calling them by their names, and their subsequent return to their apartment where all identities were revealed. Tubbo explained how he found Tommy, having managed to get access to a secret phone Dream used to rent out the warehouse he'd been kept captive in. Nuke and Ender joined in on a syndicate meeting to report their findings, and the group made a plan for how to break Tommy out. Tubbo and Ranbu only knew the identities of Siren, Blade, and Zephyrus, and those three were the only ones who knew Nuke and Ender's identities as well. Since rescuing Tommy, the Soots had been letting Tubbo and Ranbu sleep on the couch in the living room, knowing neither of them would want to leave. As Tubbo finished talking, Tommy found himself throwing at his blankets, his biggest question still being left unanswered. So, are you guys, okay with working with the syndicate now? Or are you gonna go back to hating them after this? Tommy asked, the silent question of where do we stand now hidden underneath the words. I mean, the syndicate isn't as bad as we thought they were, Ranbu admitted, looking sheepish. They all seem to really care about you, and while I think we both expected them to be more focused on taking Dream down, that wasn't actually the case. After Dream, Flame, and 404 got away, no one bothered trying to chase after them. Instead, everyone started hounding me about you, asking if you were okay. I wouldn't say we're working with the syndicate now, Tubbo chimed in, but I wouldn't be opposed to hearing them out if they ever did need our help with future stuff. Tommy frowned, his mind flashing back to that security footage of Siren killing all those men. But you guys said it yourself. They're murderers. I thought you'd never want to work with them. Considering the number one hero literally kidnapped you and had you tied up in a warehouse on the edge of the city, I think the whole villain-hero situation is a bit more complicated than we thought. Rambu murmured, picking at his nails. Rambu nodded. If Dream is willing to go that far to get information, then I think I can understand why the syndicate goes to the lengths it does. Tommy stared at the two of them in shock. Of all the people to reconsider their stances on the syndicate, Tommy wouldn't have guessed it would be Tubbo and Rambu. But here they were, saying that they wouldn't mind hearing the syndicate out if they ever wanted to work together again in the future. As if that whole screaming match the three of them had over Tommy's healing just meant nothing. I need more water. So where does that leave us? Tommy asked, struggling to keep the bitterness out of his voice. Are you guys still pissed at me for healing them? To his surprise, Tubbo's response was immediate. No, neither of us are pissed about that anymore. And honestly, it was just fucking stupid of us to react like that in the first place, he said, scooting a bit closer to the edge of the bed. It was so fucking shitty of us. Oh, hi, Munchie. What's up? The past few chapters I've been reading have been really, really action-filled. Dream kidnapped Tommy. He and 404, heroes, were trying to get information out of Tommy about the identities of the Syndicate, a group of villains that he's been healing after fights. But the Syndicate, along with Vigilantes Nuke and Ender, who are Tommy's roommates. I don't know if you've read the story before. I'm just going in assuming that you haven't. Basically, Tommy got saved by the Syndicate and his vigilante friends. Let's see. Especially me. You know, not much, just chilling, wanting to wind down before bed and work tomorrow morning. Ooh, sounds action-packed. No, I haven't read it. Oh, okay. It's, like, really confusing to try and summarize at this point, but if you have any questions, I'll answer them along the way. And no question is a stupid question. Let's see, where was I? Especially me. I was a proper dick to you for no good reason, even before you found out we were Nuke and Ender. Tommy shrugged. I mean, I was keeping my own secrets, so it's kind of understandable. No, it's not, Tubbo said, his voice firm. It was unfair to you. I was just being a stubborn idiot. We were keeping a huge secret from you, so I had no right to be pissed at you for doing the same. Don't worry about summarizing, I'll pick up where I can. Oh, okay, sweet. And I should have tried harder to tell you what was going on, Rambu added. I shouldn't have just given up as easily as I did, even though I could see how things were splintering between us because of the secrets. Tubbo nodded, nudging Rambu's shoulder before reaching forward to take one of Tommy's hands. Look, we both fucked up, but me especially. I was an asshole to you in so many ways, and I shouldn't have let my stubbornness let everything go to shit the way it did. I'm sorry, Tommy, for all of that shit. Suddenly, Rambu joined in to rest his hand on top of Tubbo's. I'm sorry too. Tommy's breathing hitched as he looked between his two best friends, his family. His heart ached because, God, he had missed them. He'd missed both of them so fucking much. Without saying anything, Tommy just opened his arms, and the two of them got the message as they surged in for a group hug. Tommy was still a bit sore, but he held back his winces as Tubbo buried his face in Tommy's shoulder, and Rambu rested his chin on top of Tommy's head. I also owe you guys an apology, Tommy said, his voice muffled by Rambu's sweatshirt. You don't... No, I need to apologize, Tommy continued, cutting Tubbo's argument off. Even if you weren't Nuke and Ender, I shouldn't have hidden my healing from you guys. It just put you guys in more danger to be in the dark than if I'd just been honest with you. I won't fuck that up again. How about we agree not to lie to each other anymore? Rambu asked above Tommy's head. Tommy laughed as the arms around him squeezed tighter. Sounds good to me. Me too, Tubbo agreed, his hair tickling Tommy's jaw. The three of them stayed like that for a few moments, Tommy just relishing in the fact that he had his best friends back. The awkwardness between them had dissipated, and even though Tommy wasn't sure how things were going to go forward from here, at least he knew he had the two of them by his side again. After a little bit, Tubbo and Rambu pulled back so they were properly sitting in their seats again, and Tommy felt lighter than he had in weeks. Though now that the three of them had said what needed to be said, Tommy noticed the other odd absence from his room. So, not that having you two here isn't fantastic, because it is, but where's Will? I thought he would have been hovering by me, waiting for me to wake up all worried and shit. Tommy asked, frowning at the closed door to his bedroom. Well, Wilbur wasn't sure if you'd want to see him when you woke up, Rambu explained, wringing his hands in his lap. He thought it'd be better if he just kind of stayed away until you figured out if you wanted to talk to him or not. Tommy's frown deepened. Did he want to talk to Wilbur? Thinking about him again brought back that same anger from when he'd first woken up. Wilbur had lied to him. He'd been lying to Tommy ever since that first day he came to the cafe. He knew exactly who Tommy was and what he could do, but pretended like that was their first time meeting. Had Wilbur even wanted to be Tommy's best friend? Or had he just wanted to keep Tommy close by because of his powers? His heart twisted painfully at the idea that Wilbur might have just befriended him because he was a healer. Was that all he was good for? No. Wilbur genuinely cared about him. He'd called Tommy his brother for fuck's sake. Of course he cared. Right? Or was it all just a ploy to get Tommy to trust him so he could keep him close? Tommy wanted to believe it wasn't all a lie, but considering how much Wilbur had already lied to him, he honestly wasn't sure. A part of him wanted to ask Wilbur directly, but the idea of seeing him right now, when his body still ached and his thoughts were still stuffed with cotton, leaving everything feeling a bit too raw, a bit too bright, he wasn't sure if he was ready for that conversation yet. Do you want to talk to Wilbur? Tubbo then asked, noticing Tommy's pained expression. Tommy stared at his hands for a moment, before shaking his head. Not right now. I need some time to think things over. Both of them nodded in understanding. Neither of them were going to push him to see Wilbur if he didn't want to, and Tommy was glad for that. Techno and Phil were probably going to want to see him at some point too, and while Tommy wasn't as mad at them as he was mad at them as he was at Wilbur, they still had some explaining to do. Before Tommy could worry too much about his future confrontations, though, there was a buzz from Tubbo's phone, and he furrowed his brows at the screen. Apparently you have a visitor, Tommy. Tommy blinked. A visitor? Phil says she's waiting outside your door, Tubbo said, reading the text. They all turned their heads to the door, and Tommy frowned as he tried to figure out who it could be. If the person was a woman, then maybe it was Nemesis? She seemed like the type who would visit him while he was sick. Maybe she had Thanatos with her. Hopefully Tubbo and Rambu were cool with all the syndicate members and not just the Soots, because if not, things would get really awkward. I'll get the door, Rambu said, pushing to his feet. Tubbo moved to stand as well as the door swung open, and Tommy's eyes widened when he saw who was on the other side. Puffy? Tommy exclaimed, lurching forward to try and stand up, only for Tubbo to hold him down to the bed with a hand on his shoulder. Puffy, who was holding a Tupperware container of food and a takeout cup from the cafe, smiled at the three of them. Hi guys, I wanted to stop by and check on Tommy, she said, her bright curls bouncing around her head. Rambu blinked. Oh, come in, he stammered, awkwardly standing aside so she could come into the room. Why the hell was Puffy here? There was no way she could have known what happened. Phil must have lied to her and said he got sick or something as the reason he had missed his shifts. They were friends after all, so Tommy wouldn't be surprised if they talked. But why hadn't Phil warned them what the cover story was? Puffy stepped into the bedroom, making her way over to Tommy's bedside and setting down the food and steaming cup on his nightstand. You look like shit, she teased, pressing a hand to his forehead to check his temperature. You feeling all right, though? Tommy was floundering, trying to figure out what he could and couldn't say in front of her. Yeah, I'm okay. Do you feel up to having a conversation? There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, but I don't want to push you if you need more rest. It can wait, Puffy explained gently, running her fingers through his curls. Am I fired? Tommy asked, frowning at her. Puffy laughed. No, you're not fired. It's not one of those conversations. Well, thank fucking God for that. Tommy breathed a sigh of relief and leaned further into Puffy's hand, enjoying the way her nails scratched his scalp. Good to talk then. Alright. Tubbo, Rambu, do you guys mind leaving us alone for a bit? This is kind of private, she asked, shooting an apologetic glance at the two boys. Rambu and Tubbo shared an uncertain look, but Tommy tried to reassure them with his eyes. This was Puffy. Even if he wasn't sure what lie Phil had told her, he could manage on his own. After a moment of hesitation, both of his friends filed out, letting the door click shut behind them. Once they were gone, Puffy settled herself in the seat Tubbo had been in and gave Tommy a warm smile. Phil told me what happened, she said without preamble. Tommy blinked. That could mean a lot of things. He told you that Dream kidnapped you and the Syndicate had to go rescue you? Puffy finished without missing a beat. Yeah, he explained it all. What? Tommy froze, staring at Puffy in shock. She knew that Dream had kidnapped him and that the fucking Syndicate had rescued him, but she didn't even seem surprised. Had Phil told her about the healing thing? Hell, she didn't even seem confused as to why Phil was the one who told her all that stuff. Did she know Phil was Zephyrus? How the fuck would she know that? Did you... Tommy's thoughts were reeling as he tried to form a coherent sentence in response to that. Thankfully, Puffy seemed to take mercy on him. I know about your work with the Syndicate. Tommy blinked. Did Phil tell you? Puffy's smile stayed soft and warm, not seeming even the least bit fazed by what she was saying. If anything, she almost looked sympathetic. Tommy, there's a camera in the back room of the cafe. hard at that. Oh my god. Why did I never? That's so. Oh my god, I'm gonna pass out. That is so funny. But for a bit of context, Puffy is the owner of the cafe that Tommy works at, and the cafe was where Tommy was healing supervillains. God, I'm watching you. Oh my god, okay. And just like that, Tommy's breath caught in his throat. There was a camera in the back room. That wasn't possible. He'd never seen a camera in there before. He would have noticed it, right? There's no way he could have missed something as obvious as that. If that was true, though, that meant Puffy had known this whole time. Ever since he first healed Thanatos in the back room, Puffy would have known. Which meant she had let him lie to her face for months without saying anything. Without even trying to stop it. What? Tommy squeaked out, unable to piece together a sentence more complex than that. The camera's kind of hidden behind the shelves. I didn't put it like that on purpose. Things just got moved around. But yeah, I've known about your healing since you first helped Thanatos and Nemesis. Puffy explained, her tone impossibly gentle. So, you've known this whole time? Tommy asked, his hand shaking. Who do you think was keeping the first aid kit stocked with bandages? Oh shit. Fucking hell, how could he have been so stupid? How did he never notice that the first aid kit never seemed to run out of bandages, despite the fact that he never bothered to refill it? Ooh, okay, I like this method of writing, because nowhere in the story previous to this did he mention, like, did the author mention that Tommy forgot to refill the first aid, like, so not only does it leave him dubious to his own actions or him dubious to the things going on around him, but also the reader, because there are some things that the reader knows that he doesn't. Like, obviously, we've known from the beginning that Siren was Wilbur, Zephyrus was Phil, and Blade was Technoblade. Like, and that all the syndicates, like, identities, and the heroes as well. To be fair, like, that was obvious from the start. But oh wow, that is, I like that little addition. Like, it I really thought this whole time that what's it called? It's like, there's like this vocabulary term that I learned in English 9 where, like, the story, like, is written in a way that makes the reader clairvoyant and the characters unknowing. Like, I thought that this was just going to be strictly that kind of story, but no. That little tidbit, like, we didn't even know of that. What point of view is this? First person omniscient or third person omniscient? I think it's third person omniscient. That's what the term was. Point of view omnisciency or something like that. Okay, let's see. I'm such an idiot, Tommy mumbled, hiding his face in his hands. You pissed at me? Puffy snorted, and reached out a hand to pull his away from his face. Do you really think I would have kept refilling the first aid kit if I didn't approve of what you were doing? Tommy frowned. But how are you not pissed? I lied to you. And I was using your back room to heal fucking supervillains. You should hate me. You were trying to help people, Puffy reassured him. I understand why you didn't want to tell me, because if I were anyone else, I probably would have turned you into the police. But you're just a kid, Tommy. One who got thrown into this world of villains and heroes without any kind of warning. You did the best you could because you just wanted to help. I can't be mad at you for that. So that has a similar writing vibe to the Harry Potter but also Hunger Games terms games in terms of POV. That is true. Because I never really thought about the fact that even with third-person omniscient, even if a story is in third-person omniscient, that doesn't mean that we know everything. Because with Harry Potter, we didn't know until the 7th, well, I'm sure there was probably some, heavy-duty theorists out there that figured that that Harry was the secret 7th Horcrux, but for the most part, none of us knew until the last book. I guess that's kind of the point of third-person omniscient. Lure us into this feeling that we know everything, and then hit us with a plot twist right when we least expect it. Harry Potter was a fever dream and a half. Honestly, yeah. I was hyper-fixated on Harry Potter for a good, 2 years of my life. Maybe a little bit more. But yeah. Let's see. Fucking hell. Tommy was shocked he hadn't had a heart attack from all the bombshells being dropped on him today. I'm sorry, Puff, he muttered. I wouldn't have used your back room if I had another option. I couldn't bring them back to my apartment, and since I worked the closing shifts, I knew no one else was going to be around, so I just figured... I was too in elementary school. I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter when I was a kid, because, witchcraft, ooh, bad, sinful. But I somehow convinced my parents to let me read it when I was 13. So, I have no idea how I did that, but... I think they said was as long as you know that none of the stuff in Harry Potter is real, nor could ever be, and I was like, okay, sure. No, I wasn't like that, but whatever. Let's see. I applaud? What do you mean I applaud? What did I say? Oh, you applaud my ability to convince my parents that to let me read Harry Potter. Let's see. Like I said, it's fine. I'm just glad you're safe now, Puffy said, squeezing his hand. She then pulled her hand away from his and shoved something warm between his fingers. Drink that. I had Foolish make it for you before I came here from the cafe. Tommy took a sip of the drink and almost moaned when the vanilla floral taste hit his tongue. It was a London fog, not too sweet but not bitter either, with a comforting taste that warmed him from the inside out. Convincing my grandparents of anything was difficult. Anyone else have it? It's all good, not she. Thanks for bringing me this, Tommy said, wrapping his hands around the cup. Of course. I figured coffee might make you a little too wired, so I thought a London fog might be a nice change of pace, Puffy told him. Then she gestured to the Tupperware on his nightstand. I also brought you some pastries from the cafe. Thought you deserved something sweet after everything you went through. Oh, fuck yeah! Tommy cheered, grabbing the Tupperware with his free hand and prying off the lid. His eyes widened when he saw the chocolate croissant sitting on top, and immediately picked it up to tear a bite out of it. Thank you, Puffy, he said, his mouth full of croissant. Puffy chuckled. You're welcome. There was a moment of silence as Tommy chewed his food, the chocolate melting across his tongue and washing down the sticky sweetness with his tea. It was then he thought more about what Puffy had said, and suddenly something clicked. Wait, he said, swallowing the bite of his croissant. Do you know the Syndicate's identities? Puffy's smile faded, and she nodded. Yeah, I do. Phil and I go way back. Tommy frowned. There was still something not adding up. But how does being old friends with Phil mean you can just casually know that he's one of the scariest supervillains in the city? Dropping her eyes to her lap, Puffy shrugged. I mean, I guess there's no point in hiding it from you now, she muttered, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Taking a breath, she looked up to meet his eyes. Did I ever tell you I had powers? Tommy shook his head. Puffy stared at him for a moment, as if debating something in her mind. Then she reached over to his nightstand. Before he could ask what she was doing, her hands began to glow bright red. Tommy watched as the little figurine he had of the Able sisters lifted off his nightstand and settled itself so it was floating in between Puffy's palms. She began to move her hands like she was stretching dough, and although she wasn't touching the figurine directly, it moved as if she was. The figurine went from hard plastic to some kind of soft Play-Doh-like material, and Tommy's eyes widened as he recognized what she was doing. That's matter manipulation, he whispered, staring as Puffy reshaped the hard plastic into a similarly sized figurine, albeit having turned the colors into a swirling mess. Yup, sure is, Puffy confirmed, pressing her hands together to compress the plastic into a flat disc, before she resumed her dough-like stretching with it. Matter manipulation. The ability to reshape just about anything as long as you weren't creating or destroying the matter itself. There had been one hero who had that ability, one whose palms glowed red whenever she used it, one who had a wild head of curly white hair and an impossibly kind smile. You're the captain, Tommy said, staring at Puffy in awe. Even though her hair was now split dye between brown and white, it was so obvious now that he knew it was her. The captain had always been dressed in her bright red coat, the upper half of her face covered by a sheep-like mask that only showed her mouth, with her white curls pulled back into an impossibly puffy ponytail. Puffy, while no longer donning the sheep mask, had always had a preference for bright red shirts and keeping her hair tied back, and although Tommy would have never figured it out on his own, it still felt painfully tongue-in-cheek in retrospect. I was the captain, she corrected him. I retired when the Hero Committee and I couldn't exactly see eye to eye on some things. Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. Puffy was the captain. The captain was his boss. Holy shit. Oh my god, you were my favorite hero when I was a kid, Tommy exclaimed, beaming at Puffy. Wait, seriously? Puffy asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, seriously! You were the only hero I ever liked. All the others were such stuck-up assholes, but you weren't. You were so cool and just so fucking badass. He laughed, feeling somewhat in shock. Holy fuck! I can't believe I work for the captain! This is the coolest day of my life! Puffy flushed at the compliments. I appreciate it, but unfortunately those days are long behind me. Doesn't mean you're not still a badass. Tommy grinned. Puffy snorted. Thanks, Tommy. She stopped stretching the plastic in her hands, returning the figurine back to its original state, before the glow on her hands faded away. Mabel and Sable dropped into her palm, and she gently put the figurine of the duo back on the nightstand. The reason I retired was because the Hero Committee was going in a direction I didn't like. They were becoming more focused on the donors' wants instead of what the city needed. Plus, they were turning more blind eyes to heroes who broke the rules. The joy of finding out Puffy was the captain quickly faded when he caught up to what she was saying. Do you mean heroes trying to kill villains? Pursing her lips, Puffy nodded. Not just trying. Tommy's eyes widened. Wait, do you mean a villain actually got killed? Yeah. But it's not my place to talk about the details of who he was. I just watched it happen. I was at that fight, and there was nothing I could do. I tried to stop it, but soon he was dead, and when I reported the hero responsible to the committee, they just didn't do anything. They covered it up so the media didn't hear about it, and the hero got off scot-free. Bile rose in Tommy's throat. So what happened when you left? Puffy kept her eyes on her lap. Well, I'd already considered leaving because my face had gotten revealed to Zephyrus during a fight. It was an accident, but I didn't know what he was going to do since he knew what I looked like and could easily find out who I was. So when the other villain was killed, I was just kind of the final straw, she explained, wringing her hands together. After I retired, Zephyrus found me walking down the street one night. I thought he was going to kill me for revenge or something, but he instead congratulated me on leaving the committee and asked if I wanted to join the syndicate. But you said no? Tommy asked. I said no. Puffy nodded. I was just tired of all the hero-villain bullshit at that point. Plus, I wanted the chance to spend more time with my son. So I refused his offer, and instead of getting upset, he took off his veil and introduced himself. And so we've been friends ever since. Holy shit. Tommy blinked, trying to process all of that. It made sense how Puffy and Phil knew each other now, but it was still reeling to find out that Puffy was the captain. And to be honest, he was still a bit taken back by the realization that Phil was Zephyrus, despite how stupidly obvious it was. Puffy gave him a light, tight-lipped smile. Yeah, I know it's a lot to process, but I figured you deserve to know the truth after everything you've gone through. I appreciate that, but, Tommy cut himself off, frowning as he tried to think of how to word this. You know what Phil and the rest of the syndicate have done. Better than anyone else, probably, since you were literally a hero. But you still choose to be friends with them. No matter what he did, Tommy couldn't seem to get rid of the mental image of Siren killing all those men in that security footage. That was Wilbur. Wilbur killed all those people. How the hell was Tommy supposed to look at him the same way knowing he'd done something like that? Puffy seemed to understand what he meant. I know that Phil, and by extension the rest of the syndicate, aren't good people, but I understand why they do what they do. I know I'm not going to get any of them to change their ways, especially not Phil, but I don't want to lose my friendship with him either. So yes, I still choose to be friends with the syndicate. Maybe that doesn't make me a good person, and in the past that would have upset me a lot more, but I've gotten to a place where I can be okay with that. That made sense. It reminded Tommy of Flame, how he knew what Dream and 404 was doing was wrong, but he still couldn't turn them in because they were his family. The question that lingered in Tommy's mind was really what his stance on that was. Every time he thought back to that footage, he felt like he was going to be sick. But could he really cut ties from the syndicate for that? Did he even want to? There was so much more to that situation that needed to be answered before he could even consider that question. More than anything, he needed to find out if any of it, his relationship with Wilbur, Phil saying he saw him as a son, just everything about his friendship with the Soots. He needed to find out if that was real or if they had just been using him. He wanted to think it was real. He wanted that so fucking badly. But he just wasn't sure anymore, and it hurt. Not to mention, his body also hurt, just like physically. His head was still pounding, and even though the croissant had soothed his grumbling stomach, his heavy limbs were begging him to lay down again. You fallen asleep there, bud? Puffy asked, quirking an eyebrow at him. It was only then that Tommy realized he had started swaying, and he shook himself awake again so he could try to meet Puffy's eyes. I'm alright. I'm just really tired. You should try to get some rest, Puffy told him, reaching out to squeeze his shoulder again before she pushed to her feet. If you want anything from the cafe, just send me a text and I'll make Foolish bring it over. Tommy snorted, watching as Puffy headed for the door. I'm gonna make Foolish my bitch. Puffy grinned. If he complains, I'll yell at him that you're sick and he needs to be nicer to you. You're the best boss, Puff, Tommy told her, slumping back against his pillows. And you're a really great kid, Tommy, Puffy said, her eyes softening as she stood in the doorway. Do you want me to have Tubbo and Rambu come back in here? Tommy nodded, and Puffy held the door open as Tubbo and Rambu both filed back in. He wondered if the two had been waiting outside the door the whole time. It wouldn't surprise him. They probably wanted to make sure whatever the talk with Puffy was about wouldn't upset him. Puffy let the door click shut behind her as she disappeared into the hall. Tubbo and Rambu both stared at Tommy, as if they weren't sure why they were there. Get your asses over here, Tommy grumbled, waving them towards the bed. I'm tired as fuck and this mattress can fit all three of us. Are you sure? Rambu asked, furrowing his brows. We don't want to keep you up. Tommy gave Rambu a flat look. If I was passed the fuck out for a day and a half, I don't think you two are going to keep me up. Now seriously, you guys need to feel this mattress. It's like 1,000,000 times better than ours back home. Tubbo was already moving before Tommy had finished speaking. He crawled up on the bed, yanking at the pillow under Tommy's head so it could fit both of them, while Rambu sighed and settled himself on the other pillow. Oh fucking hell, boss man, you've made a mistake, Tubbo said, squeezing up against Tommy's side. We're stealing this mattress. I'm never sleeping on anything but this again. To be fair, Tommy could probably just buy this mattress for back home with all the money the syndicates paid him, Rambu pointed out. Tommy snorted, his eyes already falling shut as Tubbo responded, Yeah, but I want this mattress. How would you even steal a mattress? It's not like it's something you can easily hide, Rambu argued. That's easy. Just go throw it out a window. What? We're not throwing a mattress out the window. It wouldn't even fit. It could if you try hard enough. It literally couldn't. Even though there was still that conflicted ache in his chest, Tommy slipped off to the sounds of his best friends arguing, feeling like a small piece of home had slotted itself back in place. The Wilbur and Tommy interaction is next chapter. Bruh! It is... I still have homework to do, and I gotta go to bed soon. I want to keep reading this. But God, I know that I can't. Came in last chapter, how are you? I'm doing well. How are you doing, Unknown? It's funny, I was... Okay, but Wilbur, when he wants attention from dads, I can have my heart. Wait. That doesn't really happen that much in this story. Not any specific things I can think of. Alright. I think that's gonna be the stream for today. Stick around for the raid. I wanna raid somebody. Who's live? know who we can raid. He has a surprisingly low amount of viewers considering the game he's playing. And also he deserves it. It was random, I zoned out and heard Wilbur and thought of videos I watched earlier. Sorry. That's alright. Oh, fuck. I definitely misspelled that. No! God, and I can't even see the message because of lag, so I have to start all over and hope for the best. Okay, did that work? Give it a few moments to load in. In the meantime, I'm gonna bring up the ending scene. Did I spell it right? Alright, I think I did. Alright. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you want to check out my other socials, type !socials and it'll show up all the other stuff. It has my Discord server, my Twitter, my Instagram, my TikTok. Anything that you'd want to follow to stay updated on me, I guess. Alright. Let's raid Michael. Michael Mitchell. He's playing the new Lego Star Wars game. I watched Sneak play it and for a bit, and it looks kind of fun, and I want to show him some support. I mean, he is a Dream SMP member and probably, like, you know what? No matter who the person is, they still deserve, like, streamers still deserve support. Sorry, I've been reading words for over 3 hours now. Wait, what was that message? What was that message? I can't read the full thing because of the raid thing. What did that say? Oh god, I can't see. Oh wait, I know how I can see. One second. It's just gonna take a moment to load. Come on. You know what? I'll just read the rest of that message later. I don't want it to automatically oh, and I can't agree more on the support thing. And okay, Mayo. All right. I don't know when I'll be able to stream next, but it should hopefully be soon. But bye-bye. Oh, I actually need to end though.